Chapter 4756. Long Xuanji's words caused Long Qian's face to turn green and white. She opened her mouth to refute, but she saw Long Xuanji turn around and slap her. Slap! Long Qianmu was dumbfounded. She didn't expect that as a divine soul, she could feel a burning pain from her soul after being slapped by another soul. Long Qian, do you know your crime? Ancestor Xuanji chided her with a dark expression. The moment Ancestor Xuanji appeared, Long Huan and the Merman Juniors had already curled up their bodies and lowered their bodies to pay their respects in the sea. What crime have I committed? Long Qian shouted in dissatisfaction. Ancestor Long Xuanji had humiliated her, the leader of the dragon clan, just for a junior. How could she face the rest of the clan in the future? You are selfish. For your own selfish desires, you implicated the entire river of forgetfulness and the innocent mermaids. Long Qian was enraged. I didn't. You did. Long Xuanji interrupted her and said coldly, the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl was left behind by our ancestors. It is indeed the most precious treasure of our mermaids. However, it was sad when we left it behind. Only those who are capable will get it. Did you remember what I said? Did you take it to heart? Long Xuanji questioned sternly. Long Chuyun is your daughter. She is a very outstanding child. The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl chose her. This is her fortune and her misfortune. Her misfortune is that she has such a self-righteous mother like you. Why did you insist that she contribute the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl to the clan? Was it really just to follow your instructions and place the mermaid pearl in the clan so that the juniors could be baptized by the mermaid pearl at any time? You clearly know that for those children who are not talented, it is useless no matter how much you baptize them. The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl will only have a negligible effect on them. This mermaid pearl will only have the greatest effect in the hands of the most talented person. Long Chuyun did not bury this 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. She gave it to the most talented child in our clan, the second-generation sect master of the Xuanji sect. This matter should have ended here. It's because of your own selfish desires that you've caused such a huge disaster, bringing disaster to the entire river of forgetfulness. Every word that Long Xuanji said was like a gem. With every word that he said, Long Qian's face turned even paler. In the end, Long Qian could only open and close her mouth. She couldn't make a single sound. Long Xuanji shook his head. I know that you want to lead the entire river of forgetfulness back to its former glory. But in everything, one must act according to one's capabilities. Everything in the world must follow the will of the heavens. You also know that the descendants of the Forgotten River Dragon clan are not as talented as before. Is it really because the 10,000-year mermaid pearl is not in the clan? It's because you're rotten, you're useless. Although I hate your cowardice and stupidity, I have no choice but to stand up and beg for mercy in front of this little girl. Long Qian, you've been blinded by greed and selfishness. Because of some trivial matters, you secretly summoned the 13 ascended elders of the clan and caused them to lose their lives in the river of forgetfulness. I represent the ancestors of the dragon clan to take your life. Do you have any questions? At this moment, a short blade flew towards Long Qian. Senior Xuanji moved his finger, and the short blade pierced through Long Qian's soul. Chapter 4757. Even though Long Qian reacted quickly and wanted to avoid it, there was nothing she could do. After being targeted by Long Xuanji's powerful spiritual soul, Long Qian had nowhere to run. She could only watch as the dagger pierced through her spiritual body. That bone-chilling cold caused her to feel a trace of panic for no reason. No, it was impossible. She couldn't have disappeared in the Wangchuan realm. She was Long Qian, the future and hope of the Wangchuan dragon clan. She was the dragon clan leader who could lead the Wangchuan dragon clan back to its peak. Long Qian was in a daze as she lowered her head mechanically. She couldn't hide the shock in her eyes as she watched herself shatter into pieces and disappear with the wind. She couldn't accept it. In the end, Long Xuanji only glanced at Long Qian indifferently, taking in the unwillingness in her eyes. Then he shook his head and couldn't help but sigh. He didn't expect the Wangchuan dragon clan to have a clan leader who was so determined to return to its peak. But was that possible? With the passage of time, there were many changes from generation to generation. It had been 300 to 400 years since the Wangchuan dragon clan reached its peak. No clan could boast that they would be able to prosper forever. Even the prosperous Divine Continent, Underworld Continent, and Song Continent could guarantee that their descendants would be able to prosper and last forever. It couldn't be. Everything could only follow the laws of heaven and follow the development of history. That was all. Long Xuanji couldn't help but shake his head. He took one last look at Long Qian's soul fragment before it disappeared into the sea. From today onwards, the remaining members of the Wangchuan dragon clan will be exiled to the Wangchuan Cold Valley. Ancestor Long Xuanji's cold words caused everyone to be slightly stunned. Long Huan. When Ancestor Xuanji said Long Huan's name coldly, the latter's body trembled. He quickly swam out from the group of mermaids and bowed. Junior Long Huan greets Ancestor Xuanji. Ancestor Xuanji nodded calmly. Your grandmother's mistake almost destroyed the entire Wangchuan dragon clan. Now that I have punished her, do you have any complaints? Long Huan shook his head blankly. Young Master Ding, who was standing not far away, watched all of this with cold eyes. When he saw Long Huan's reaction, a trace of interest flashed across his eyes. Who would have thought that this young Master Long would have such a day? Looking at his silly appearance, he was probably struck dumb by the series of blows he had received. His sister was possessed by her selfish grandmother. His grandmother had been killed by his ancestors. All the clansmen had to move to a barren land like the Cold Valley of Forgetfulness, and they would have to endure the torment of starvation and poverty all year round. The clansmen of the Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness were barely able to keep their lives. But what future did they have? What a huge joke. Young Master Ding's eyes flickered. With a faint and indifferent smile, he lowered his head slightly. If he could see the expression on Long Chuyu's face right now, it would definitely be quite interesting. What should he do? He seemed a little impatient. She really wanted to know how the high and mighty Madame Long would feel when she found out that she had been tricked by the old madam and would be sent to the cold valley of Wangchuan to dig for wild vegetables. The more she thought about it, the more interesting it was. While young Master Ding was gloating, Long Huan and the others' faces were ashen. They opened their mouths and wanted to plead for mercy on their behalf. Chapter 47-58. However, Ancestor Xuanji's words stopped them from begging for mercy. Between death and going to the cold valley of Wangchuan, which one do you prefer? There was no room for negotiation. That was the truth. Ancestor had sold her face and forcefully saved them from the stoic little girl. How could they continue to bargain? Long Qian turned towards Arbor. When he saw her looking back at him coldly, he couldn't help but sigh. Ancestor Xuanji waved at him. Long Qian walked over with his sister, Long Shangyun. Ancestor. Long Xuanji nodded. He reached out his transparent hand and patted Long Shangyun's neck a few times. Long Shangyun slowly woke up. She looked at her ancestor, who was as pale as glass, as if a lifetime had passed. Ancestor. Tears streamed down her face the moment she opened her mouth. After being possessed by her grandmother, her soul was like a bystander, silently watching everything unfold. She was very clear about what had happened to her body. It was just that she was powerless to stop her grandmother. She didn't know what to say now. All sorts of feelings welled up in her, and she was in a daze. Long Xuanji sighed and looked at her. "You're called Long Shangyun." Long Shangyun nodded. Long Xuanji said, "Your body was possessed by Long Qian before. Although she was forced out by Jojo, she stayed in your body for a long time. Her soul is much stronger than yours, causing your body to show signs of collapse. Senior, is there any way to remedy this?" Long Qian's tears flowed. He couldn't bear the pain and agony in his heart. He started to regret it. He regretted not listening to his father and believing his grandmother's nonsense. She said that everything was for the family. Only by saving Long Shuyuan would the Wangshuan dragon family have a future. But in the end, Long Qian personally pushed Long Shuyuan out to block the lightning and threw her to her death. Why didn't his grandmother think about it when she was on the brink of death? If she pushed Long Shuyuan to her death, there would be no future for Wangshuan. Senior Xuanji was right. Everything was his grandmother's selfishness. She kept arguing and saying that she wanted Long Chuyun's aunt to return the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. In reality, who would the mermaid pearl end up in the end? Her. Everything was for her own sake. No matter how dignified she sounded, she couldn't absolve herself of her selfishness. Long Huan closed his eyes and knelt down in front of Long Xuanji, kowtowing heavily. "Ancestor, please help Shangyun. The whole thing has nothing to do with her. She was just implicated by Wu Wang." Long Shangyun smiled bitterly and reached out to hold her brother's hand. "Big brother, it's already a great fortune to be able to survive. There's no need for us to make things difficult for our ancestors." Long Xuanji sighed and turned to look at Arbor, waving at her. The little stoic walked over with a cold expression and didn't utter a word for a long time. Long Xuanji said, "Second sect master, do you have anything to say about my arrangements?" Arbor remained silent and looked at Long Xuanji indifferently. It was so long that Long Xuanji thought that Arbor was unwilling to speak. The little stoic spoke in an extremely cold voice. "You already knew my identity when you gave me the 10,000-year-old Xuanji core back then." Long Xuanji shook his head and couldn't help but laugh. "Little fellow, I'm not that resourceful. But speaking of which..." Chapter 4759. This is a fate that can't be cut off. "Ill-fated," Arbor said bluntly. "If not, why would she fall out with the dragon clan of Wangchuan?" Long Xuanji laughed and shook his head. "Child, the dragon clan of Wangchuan went to the Cold Valley. They might not return in 10 or 100 years. Look, can you forgive them?" "Never." Arbor interrupted Senior Xuanji coldly. "Senior, you've done me a favor. If you want me to let them go, I'll do as you wish." Xiao Mu stated coolly, "But that's as far as you go. I have nothing to do with the dragon clan of Wangchuan. Senior, you've been gone for so many years. You should be relieved." What she meant was, "Senior, don't interfere with the matters between the dragon clan and me." Long Qian had led people to chase after her. They had joined forces with the duo clan of Wangchuan to kill her. They had even summoned a powerful sacred beast. They had failed to harm her, but they had caused Imo Lien and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal to be in danger. How could she forgive them? That was strange. Now, it was only because Long Qian and the 13 elders of the Holy Region had been killed. Arbor could let go of the dragon clan of Wangchuan, but it didn't mean that she could make peace with them. Long Xuanji was rendered speechless by the young lady's words. He nodded helplessly. "Jojo." Long Xuanji sighed. "I'm sorry." Arbor's eyes were cold. She didn't say anything else. She nodded slightly at Long Xuanji and turned to walk towards Xian Huang. Long Xuanji looked at her stiffened back and said softly to Long Huan, "You're on your own now." His silhouette slowly lost its brilliance and disappeared like the wind and clouds. "Ancestor! Ancestor!" Long Huan and the others called out. They watched as Long Xuanji's figure faded until there was nothing left. Arbor, whose back was facing Long Xuanji, clenched her fists tightly. She didn't turn around. Her ill-fated relationship with the Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness had been completely resolved the moment she turned around. She didn't want to turn back, even if it was just to take another look at Long Xuanji. Everything was over. Even though Long Qian wasn't killed by her, she still died because of her. The 13 elders of the sanctuary had also died in the Sea of Forgetfulness because of Long Qian's summons. No matter what, the existence of this blood would stand between her and the Dragon Clan of Forgetting River. Arbor walked to Xian Huang's side and exchanged glances with his master. Xian Huang raised her hand and touched her head. "Don't be sad, little treasure. Master, did you find it in the abyss of the sacrificial sea?" Xian Huang looked at her for the entire night and nodded with a slightly solemn expression. "It's so deep that you can't see the bottom. Xiao Bao, your divine soul is not stable. You must not go down." As soon as he finished speaking, the master saw that his little disciple looked like she was about to cry. She hurriedly reached out to pull Xiao Bao into her arms and stroked the child's fur. "Xiao Bao, be good. Don't be sad. I've gone down to investigate. Even though that place is very strange, it's not a dangerous place for the two boys who fell down. Master, can they still come back?" "Of course." Xian Huang turned around and glared at the heavenly Tao as she spoke. The latter looked at her innocently with a helpless expression. What could the heavenly Tao say? The invisible suction force in the abyss of the sacrificial sea wasn't something it could control. Was it to blame? Chapter 4760. Xian Huang, things are almost done. Can you scram back now? Tian Dao glanced at her and asked weakly. Xian Huang retorted, "What's the hurry?" Didn't he see that her little disciple's emotions were fluctuating? She was not at ease leaving her little disciple like this. Tian Dao curled his lips and did not dare to be long-winded with Xian Huang. This fellow knew Xian Huang too well. If he irritated her with his chatter, he would definitely not have a good ending. The effect would be better if he did not overdo it. Xiao Mu tugged on Xian Huang's hand so tightly that it tugged at Xian Huang's heart. This child really made one's heart ache. If it was possible, Tian Dao suddenly jumped in front of the two and smiled flatteringly. Xian Huang, you've been here for too long this time. If you don't hurry back, it will be difficult for me. Xian Huang glared at it angrily. Tian Dao thought to himself, it's too difficult for me. If not for Xian Huang's gaze, he would not have jumped forward to interrupt. It was mainly because of Xian Huang. If she was unreliable, she would be more willful and unreliable than anyone else. She could not forcibly drag the little girl from this world to her world. Otherwise, it would really be a mess. Xian Huang glanced at Tian Dao and snorted. Don't worry, my disciple has a family here. I can't take her away. Then she waved at Tian Dao with a face full of disdain. Go away. I want to say a few words to my disciple. Tian Dao curled his lips and quietly slipped to the side with a faint sadness of being disdained. A pair of small black eyes could not help but roll around. Xian Huang ignored the old fellow and pulled her disciple to the side. She whispered, Little treasure, you've used the Fushi sword twice in a row. Your soul has been greatly damaged. You have to be obedient for a while. Don't use your divine sense too much. Can you listen to Master? Arbor nodded obediently, indicating that she had listened to her master's words. Xian Huang glanced at the soul-calming frost jade hanging around her neck. She reached into her bosom and took out a gourd-shaped medicine bottle and handed it to her little disciple. "Child, here is a soul-subduing pill. Take one a day for a month. It will help you repair your soul." Xiao Mu nodded her small head. "Master, are you leaving?" Xian Huang was stunned for a moment before she nodded. She raised her hand and patted the little fellow's head. "You must be well. Promise me that you will protect yourself well." Heavenly Tao had been secretly observing them for a while. At this moment, he hurriedly jumped up and smiled obsequiously. "Dark Phoenix, do you want me to send you on your way?" "Get lost, can't I walk on my own?" After Xian Huang finished speaking, she turned around and made a gesture to her little disciple. Then, she tore open the space in front of her and disappeared instantly. Heavenly Tao pursed his lips and mumbled to himself. He then hurriedly looked at the little girl with a grin. That stoic face. The little stoic ignored him and turned to say to little Tai Sui and the others, "I'm going to stay here for a while. Waiting for her lotus, waiting for rotten peach blossoms. Until they came back." Although little Tai Sui did not know what was going on, he still nodded. "Okay." Arbor called out to Mu Xingqian and put them all into the star domain. She turned around and was about to leave when she suddenly heard Long Shangyun say, "Cousin." Arbor originally wanted to leave without looking back, but she heard Long Shangyun say urgently, "You can make a trip to the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm. We once saw a wisp of Crown Prince Mo Lian's soul projection there." Chapter 4761. Arbor's footsteps paused, and she turned to look in Long Shangyun's direction. The latter nodded slightly at her with a slightly bitter expression. "Actually, as long as it's a cultivator who often goes to the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm, they should have seen it. I feel that if you go to Pond Lotus Sacred Realm and find the Crown Prince's soul, it should help you find where he is." Long Shangyun didn't say anything else. Arbor understood her meaning. If that really was Mo Lian's soul, then she might be able to contact Jojo's lotus. However, she didn't feel very hopeful about this. After all, from what she knew, Mo Lian's soul should be very complete. His knowledge pool had never been injured before, so he still didn't know what that wisp of soul was. But if it was only in terms of appearance. Arbor's gaze fell on Long Shangyun, and she stared for a while before saying, "So when you first saw Mo Lian, you acted so strangely." She remembered that when she saw Mo Lian back then, she had even looked at him a few more times in astonishment and had almost blurted out something to Long Huan. In the end, Long Huan pulled on his arm and he shut up. What Long Shangyun was surprised about was that she had seen a soul that looked very similar to Mo Lian in Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. "I'm sorry, cousin," Long Huan said in a low voice. "I've never told you about this. The soul that looks like Crown Prince Lian has always been wandering around Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. People who went to train would occasionally meet it once or twice. I've never told you before. It's because Pond Lotus Sacred Realm is the only place that is jointly guarded by the great clans of Forgotten River. Even if I told you, without the permission of the other clans, you wouldn't be able to enter that place. A year ago, an elder of the Forgotten River Duo clan wanted to refine this soul." Long Huan sighed. However, in the end, he didn't come out of Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. After that, Pond Lotus Sacred Realm automatically sealed itself, and no longer allowed anyone to enter. That's why I didn't tell sister to tell you about it. It's useless even if I tell you. No one can enter now. Arbor was expressionless as he nodded at the siblings. Upon seeing this, Long Huan sighed lightly and cupped his hands at Xiao Mu. "Farewell. Goodbye." Long Shangyun nodded weakly at the little crown princess. She seemed to be in a very bad mental state, and her face was exceptionally pale. The cold valley of the River of Forgetfulness this time was known as the most barren and difficult place in the River of Forgetfulness. They probably wouldn't be able to come out for the next 100 years. Thinking about it this way, Ancestor Xuanji's punishment of the Long siblings and the rest of the dragon clan was not light. Long Xiangyun. Arbor suddenly called out to her. Long Xiangyun turned around to look at her. Suddenly, she saw a white jade porcelain medicine bottle flying towards her. Long Huan hastily reached out to take it and glanced at Arbor in astonishment. He probably did not expect that this black-hearted little stoic would actually throw a bottle of medicinal pills to his younger sister. There are 30 soul-subduing pills in the jade bottle. You can take one every 5 days. It will more or less help you a little. Long Xiangyun smiled at her. Her smile was slightly pale and did not have its usual radiance. Many thanks. Xiaomu watched as the siblings left with their clansmen, and she only retracted her gaze after a long while. Looking back at the calm surface of the River of Forgetfulness, Arbor's eyes deepened. Chapter 4762. Since they planned to stay in the River of Forgetfulness for a while, Arbor discussed with Rome Qing and the others. They set up a defensive talisman formation on the original snowy island and had everyone settle down there for the time being. Those who needed to cultivate cultivated, and those who needed to refine pills concocted pills. Right now, Xiaomu could only make herself slightly busier in order to not let her imagination run wild. Huang He and the others also didn't dare to ask. Ever since they sent off the Long siblings that day, Jojo became increasingly taciturn. She usually kept herself as busy as a small spinning top. If she wasn't guiding them in pill refinement, she was helping Rome Qing and speeding up their training. The cultivators complained incessantly in their hearts, but they didn't dare to reveal anything on the surface. They had all deeply experienced the little stoic's methods. Try it if you dare to complain. I guarantee you'll suffer 100 times more than others the next day. This stoic face was just this swindling. What could you do to her? 3 days later, Arbor strolled back and forth on the surface of the River of Forgetfulness by herself. During this period, she had developed a habit of waiting on the surface for Jojo's lotus to return. She habitually crouched here and stared blankly at the boundless water. She had carved out a large fissure here, and an extremely deep trench appeared. The water on both sides flowed into this deep trench and flowed endlessly. The surface of the sea was still so calm without any ripples. However, they had to be very careful when they reached this place in the future. If they were swept into this trench by the rapids, it would truly be terrible luck. Arbor stared blankly at the trench again today. She sat cross-legged on a futon, and her figure seemed to grow beside the trench, firmly fixed there. She didn't slide down with the rapids, nor did she float out with the currents. She just sat there like this, staring blankly at the deep trench. She didn't know how long she had been in this state. Little Tai Sui had also come out to persuade her, but he couldn't persuade this little fellow. When Mo Lien fell into the abyss of the sacrificial sea, Jojo's heart also fell in with her. Jojo, how about we go to the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm to take a look? Little Tai Sui came out again and stood next to the little stoic worriedly, his eyes fixed on her. Arbor looked up at the little Tai Sui. Do you think Long Xiangyun's words are reliable? At that time, I feel that she has no reason to lie to you. You didn't lie to me, but if you want to go to the Pond Lotus Sacred Land, it won't be something that can be solved in a day or two. Jojo still has to wait for Lotus here. Arbor hesitated for a moment and said. Little Tai Sui secretly heaved a sigh of relief. As long as Jojo was willing to go to the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm, everything was fine. Although he didn't know if Lotus Soul existed in this Pond Lotus sacred realm, after all Xiao Xiao going out for a walk and strolling around the mystic realm was much better than squatting here like a rock waiting for her husband. Arbor glanced at him. Little Tai Sui, will something happen to Jojo's lotus? Of course not. Little Tai Sui pursed his lips and said, haven't you heard of an old saying? What? A scourge lives for 1,000 years. Arbor, Little Tai Sui harumphed and said, what can happen to him? Didn't you already know? The result of the Hidden Night Pavilion's message is that his bright lamp projection is completely unharmed, which means that he's perfectly fine. He's only fine for the time being, Arbor thought worriedly. Jojo, Little Tai Sui said seriously, I think we should go. Chapter 4763. If we don't go to the Pond Lotus sacred realm to take a look, how will we know whether that soul belongs to Lotus or not? If we really miss Lotus's soul, then won't we regret it immensely in the future? Arbor thought so as well, so she nodded at Little Tai Sui. Then how about you bring some people to look for it? Little Tai Sui's face was taut as he shook his head and said, that won't do. You need to personally make a trip there. After all, who knows if that guy's soul will be so perverted that he won't even recognize his own family. Arbor, if it really is his soul, even if it's just a trace of his soul brand, he definitely won't attack you. If he attacks you, then it means it's not him. It won't be too late for us to destroy him then. Arbor blinked, feeling that Little Tai Sui's words actually made some sense. However, she still couldn't resist asking, why do we have to destroy him if it's not Lotus's soul? Little Tai Sui humphed. Don't you feel uncomfortable looking at him? Why does he look like Imo Lien and not him? Arbor was actually a bit speechless. Just how much did Little Tai Sui care about Jojo's lotus? He couldn't even look like Lotus, alright. Little Tai Sui moved his small arms and legs and bounced in front of her. Go make preparations. We'll set off immediately later, okay? Right now, he had to persuade the little stoic first. He couldn't let her stay in this place and be a lookout for her husband. Arbor glanced down at Little Tai Sui and suddenly reached out to pinch his small face. Tai Sui, thank you. She knew this guy just wanted to persuade her to leave this place and go somewhere else to relax. She also knew that her little companions in the star domain were all very worried about her. I've made you guys worry. Little Tai Sui humphed and hastily swatted away her paw with his small hand. He grumbled, impudent, always wanting to get physical with this old man. Arbor couldn't help but laugh and tugged at his long hair. Why are you acting so old when you're still a child? His mood inexplicably improved somewhat. Thinking about it, the Little Tai Sui was right. Since the news from the Hidden Night Pavilion said that Jojo's lotus soul was fine, then it should be fine. Taking 10,000 steps back, Mo Lien and Hichin were together, so at least they had a companion. If they encountered any problems, they would probably be able to discuss it. Although the little guy kept comforting himself, there was still a lingering shadow in his heart. She thought of that matured berserk sacred beast. That was really an unstable factor. Little Tai Sui snuck a glance at him, pursed its lips, and said with a solemn expression, all right, don't think too much about it. Anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. His voice paused, and his expression abruptly changed. This time, he couldn't care less about pretending to be an elder lecturing her with sincere and heartfelt words. He hastily grabbed Xiao Mu's fair wrist and ordered sternly, quickly return to the star. Before he could finish saying the word domain, the river of forgetfulness shook violently. Arbor suddenly felt her body sink, and she reflexively reached out to grab the Little Tai Sui's lapel. However, he only managed to grab the boy's green and white belt, which was embroidered with emerald green bamboo, before he was sent flying by a huge shock wave uncontrollably. Arbor didn't even have time to open her star domain before she fainted. On the calm surface of the River of Forgetfulness, a series of explosions could be heard. The entire sea was filled with thunderous sounds. At this time, the River of Forgetfulness was being bombarded by divine stone cannons. Chapter 4764. An hour ago, when Madame Long received the news that her son and daughter had moved to the cold valley of forgetfulness, she almost collapsed. Why do we have to go to the cold valley of forgetfulness? This is an order from our ancestor. Long Chuyu's expression was also very bad. He had already received news that Long Huan did not listen to him and become friends with Jojo. Instead, he followed his grandmother and did a series of foolish things. Ancestor Xuanji has already passed away for so many years. Why does she still want to interfere with the clan's matters? What Madame Long wanted to say was, what right does Ancestor Xuanji have to send the entire Wanchuan dragon clan to the cold valley of forgetfulness? Because this is an order from our ancestor. Long Chuyu coughed heavily and stared at her sternly. Everyone has to accept it. Madame Long's eyes were red and her voice was extremely mournful. Don't you know what kind of place the cold valley of forgetfulness is? How can anyone live in such a place? How long will it take for us to move there? 100 years. Long Chuyu said indifferently. What? Madame Long's eyes were wide open. Why? Before Long Chuyu could get angry, he heard a loud sound and the entire sea defense barrier above them seemed to ripple slightly under the impact. Through the transparent barrier, Long Chuyu and Madame Long could see countless panicked little fish, wagging their tails and running around in all directions. Deafening explosions continued to ring out. Long Chuyu hurriedly called someone over and asked, "What happened?" "Someone's attacking us. The other clans have sent a distress signal." Long Chuyu's expression was grave. "Who did it?" "We don't know yet. We only see countless godstone cannons bombarding our barrier." Madame Long cried out in panic. "What? How long can the barrier last?" This was no joke. The reason why they were able to live at the bottom of the forgetfulness and even be isolated was because of the barrier. Once the barrier was broken, the seawater outside would definitely pour in. At that time, the entire Forgetfulness clan's land would collapse and the losses would be disastrous. They had just been sent to the cold valley of forgetfulness and were attacked repeatedly. Long Chuyu didn't believe that there was no premeditated plan. But who was it that was able to gather so many divine stone cannons? Long Chuyu took a deep breath and quickly walked outside. "Let's go and take a look." "Arbor, it must be Arbor." Madame Long angrily shouted, "The matriarch just left," and she immediately brought people to attack Wang Chuan. "This little girl is really ruthless." "Shut up." Long Chuyu glared at her in annoyance. "You usually look like a smart person, but why can't you always be smart at critical moments?" "How could it be Jojo? She already knows that Ancestor Xuanji of the Dragon Clan banished us all to the forgetful river Cold Valley. Given her character, she would have refuted Ancestor Xuanji's decision on the spot if she did not agree with him. Since she didn't say anything, it means that she has tacitly agreed to our ancestor's decision," Long Chuyu said with a cold voice. "Isn't that perfect?" Madame Long's face was full of hatred. "If we all leave and are banished to the cold valley of forgetfulness, she can take over the magpie's nest and call herself the Great King." "Ha, who's taking over the magpie's nest?" A cold voice slowly entered Madame Long's ears. Chapter 4765. Long Chuyu and Madame Long were both startled when they saw the handsome young man strolling over with a face as cold as water. Madame Long's expression changed slightly, and she finally couldn't help but say angrily, "It's you. So it was you who brought people with the divine stone cannon to bombard our Wangchuan clan's land?" She turned her head and roared at Long Chuyu, "Look at the good son you taught. This little bastard is getting bolder and bolder." Long Chuyu clutched his chest and coughed heavily a few times. His expression was somewhat incredulous as he looked at the young man in front of him with a complicated gaze. Why did you do this?" A trace of alienation and indifference flashed through Ding Yun's eyes, revealing a strange light. "Do I need any special reason to do this?" You hate me, don't you?" Long Chuyu looked at his son with a pained expression, and there seemed to be a flickering light in his eyes. Young Master Ding was too lazy to look at him, and said coldly, "You think too highly of yourself. I've never met you since we were young, and only recently did you know of my existence. Do you think I can hate a stranger?" Long Chuyu closed his eyes in pain, and said with certainty, "You just hate me. Whatever you say." Ding Yun waved his hand impatiently, "Men, tie him up." Then, a few disciples of the demonic sect dressed in strange clothes came forward and attacked without any explanation. Madame Long wanted to resist, but she was not Ding Yun's opponent at all. In less than a second, she was bound by the layers of wood spirits that young Master Ding had wrapped around her. Circles of wood vines tied her body like a fried dough twist, tightly wrapping her inside. Madame Long even found it difficult to breathe normally, and her face immediately turned red. Long Chuyu hurriedly said, Don't do this to your mother, shut up." Ding Yun unhappily interrupted Long Chuyu's words, and looked at him coldly, "You should take care of yourself first. Good for nothing, sick all over, I don't know what my mother saw in you back then." Long Chuyu looked at his son with a pale face, and opened his mouth, but he was speechless. "Long Yun, you disgraceful little bastard. Long Yun." Young Master Ding muttered these two words playfully. He turned his head to look at Madame Long, who was wrapped in wooden vines. A solid wood spirit whip hit the woman's body. "Ah!" Mrs. Long screamed in pain. Her eyes widened in shock as she stared at young Master Ding in disbelief. It was as if she hadn't expected Ding Yun to be so bold as to openly lay a vicious hand on her, his official mother. "You disobedient and unfilial little bastard, how dare you!" Mrs. Long's exasperated screams came to an abrupt end under another lash of the whip. Young Master Ding looked coldly at the woman in front of him. Suddenly, he smiled like a spring breeze. "Madam, do you think that no one will ever find out about the vicious, heartless, and inhumane things you have done?" Madame Long's eyes narrowed slightly as she subconsciously turned to look at Ding Yun. "Long Yun, what are you talking about?" "Madam, it's better to call me Ding Yun." The man had a vicious smile on his face as he looked coldly at Madame Long. "Did you think that one day, you would fall into my hands? It's not that the heavens don't punish you." Chapter 4766. Previously, it was just not the right time. Ding Yun stared coldly at Mrs. Long, and now, it's clearly the right time. A rare trace of panic flashed across Mrs. Long's face. Her gaze followed Ding Yun's raised arm back and forth. She opened her mouth, but seeing that the whip was about to land again, she hurriedly screamed, Long Yun, let's talk things out." Slap. The wood spirit whip in Ding Yun's hand unceremoniously whipped the woman's white cheek. "Ah!" Madame Long was shocked and angry. She covered her face with her hands in fear. "If Mrs. Long's memory is bad, I don't mind reminding you again." Ding Yun looked at her coldly. "Madam, it's better to call me Ding Yun. I'm not used to hearing others call me by an unfamiliar name." Mrs. Long's face was distorted. Her eyes were filled with venom as she stared at Ding Yun. "Ding Yun." Ding Yun smiled and nodded. "Madam, if you have anything to ask, just ask." Madame Long gritted her teeth and clenched her teeth, not making a sound. Since Madam has nothing to say, then let me say it. Long Chuyu was finally able to see some clues. Her son seemed to have come here to settle accounts with Madame Long. But what he didn't understand was that his son had followed Ding Xian since young and never knew his wife. Where did this inexplicable hatred come from? Could it be that Ding Xian often mentioned them in front of his son? Long Chuyu couldn't figure it out. Ding Yun couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with Mrs. Long. He went straight to the point. Watching your son and daughter go to a barren place like the Forgotten River Cold Valley and not be able to leave the valley for 100 years, isn't this heartbreaking? What are you trying to say? Mrs. Long glared at the man in front of her and shouted, Ding Yun, don't try to get information from me. It's useless. Self-righteous. Young Master Ding smiled coldly at her. What do I need to get information from a dying person like you? If I want to know something, wouldn't it be faster to search your soul? Madame Long trembled and looked up at young Master Ding in shock. The latter smiled at her gently and said, Don't worry, I won't kill you for the time being. There are some things that I want to clarify with you. You're the only one who knows about this. As for whether he would take her life after asking her, that would depend on his mood. Madame Long sneered, Do I have to answer just because you asked? As soon as she finished speaking, she felt a hand with fingers as hard as steel tightly gripping her throat. Ding Yun looked at her with a smile, his eyes filled with ruthless coldness. If you don't tell me, you won't even have the chance to see your children one last time. What do you mean? Do you still not understand, madam? Ding Yun looked at her with a cold expression and said, Do you think that I only brought people to encircle and annihilate the remaining old, weak, women, and children of your Wangchuan clan? Long Chuyu's eyes narrowed as he suddenly shouted angrily, Yun, you even sent people to deal with Ji, and Shang Yun. Father is still the smart one. Ding Yun smiled and nodded. You understood immediately. You. Madame Long sucked in a breath of cold air and screamed with great difficulty, You demon, you, ah. Chapter 47-67. Her throat tightened, causing her to be unable to spit out a single word. Ding Yun coldly looked at the woman in front of him and sneered, Before saying that I'm cruel, Madame Long, shouldn't you properly reflect on yourself? You know best what you've done in the past. Yun, At the side, Long Chuyu was weeping with tears and snot. Yun, your younger brother and sister are innocent. Innocent? Who isn't innocent? If I'm not innocent, then isn't my mother innocent? Ding Yun suddenly turned his head and roared at Long Chuyu with a cold expression. If you weren't too timing, would you have caused my mother's tragedy? If it wasn't for you, would my mother have been so crazy as to kill my foster father back then? And even made me duel with my brother? Ding Yun heavily kicked Madame Long in front of him, his hand fiercely clutching her neck. If you think that Long Huan and Long Shang Yun are innocent, then what about me? Am I not innocent? Who did I offend? I was locked in a small dark room by my own mother, had to duel with my own brother, and even killed him with my own hands. Long Chuyu looked at his son in shock, his face filled with disbelief. You said, what did you say? At this moment, Ding Yun had already sunk into a huge sorrow. It was as if he was seeing that terrifying scene from more than 10 years ago. At that time, when he pushed open the door of that gloomy and terrifying woodshed, a child pounced on him, kicking and tearing at him. He had no choice. If he didn't kill, others would kill him. At that time, he was only 10 years old. Did he want to die? What could he do if he didn't want to die? His mother left behind a ruthless sentence, saying that there could only be one person who walked out of that dark room alive. Long Chuyu suddenly slumped to the ground and wailed loudly, This isn't real, this isn't real. Cry, you only know how to cry. Other than crying, what else can you do? Ding Yun's face was filled with anger as he angrily said to Long Chuyu. If you weren't indecisive and two-timing back then, harming others and yourself, how could Mother have become like this? Mother's mental illness is getting worse and worse. Otherwise, why would she be crazy enough to lock us two brothers in the same room and force us to fight to the death? No, you're not telling the truth, no. Of course, what Yun said can't be entirely true. A voice full of vicissitudes of life suddenly sounded from outside. Long Chuyu's expression froze, unexpectedly turning his head to look. He saw a woman who looked to be in her 50s. Her cheekbones were thin, and her cheeks were full of wrinkles. She was leaning on a walking stick carved out of ebony wood and slowly walked over. Mrs. Long was wrapped in a pile of vines. She stared at the old woman who walked in with a hint of anger in her eyes. Ding Xian, look at your good son. However, Ding Xian didn't say anything to Madame Long. She didn't even bat an eyelid at her. In the blink of an eye, she looked towards Long Chuyu and said coldly, although what Yun said is not entirely true, a part of it is. Long Chuyu trembled, almost not daring to look directly into Ding Xian's eyes. He didn't expect that after not seeing her for more than 20 years, when they met again, it would be in such a scene. She was simply so old that he didn't dare to recognize her. Long Chuyu's heart trembled slightly. If they were to walk on the street like this, the two of them would pass each other face to face. Long Chuyu definitely wouldn't recognize that this was Ding Xian herself. Chapter 4768. She had changed too much. Could a person change so much in 20 years? Long Chuyu's heart was filled with emotions as he sat on the ground in a daze, looking up at that woman. Back in the day, she was also a beautiful young lady, as beautiful as a flower. How could she have changed so much? Ding Xian looked at Ding Yun and said indifferently, even now, you still suspect that the first person Mother let you kill when you were 10 years old was your twin brother? Ding Yun looked at his mother with a complicated gaze, unable to speak for a long time. Ding Xian said, I was indeed pregnant with twins at that time. However, your younger brother died when he was born. The one you killed when you were 10 years old was actually just a shadow guard. Ding Yun was stunned, but he still looked at Ding Xian in disbelief. Ding Xian continued, do you still remember that child's appearance? He didn't look like you at all, did he? No matter how ruthless Mother is, it's impossible for me to let you kill your own brother. Then what about foster father? Why do you believe those specious rumors? Ding Xian said coldly, your foster father was indeed killed by me, but at that time, he was plotting to seize our Beijing manor. How could I let him succeed? The marriage alliance between Carefree Valley and Beijing Manor, your foster father was eyeing Beijing Manor's sphere of influence. How sincere do you think he was to you? He just gave you some small favors. Ding Xian looked at her son indifferently. Don't be confused by a little bit of so-called warmth. Yes, back then, he accompanied you to practice martial arts, and you had a deep relationship with him. But so what? Ding Xian's voice was very cold. He just valued your identity. Mother, is what you said today true? When has Mother ever lied to you? Ding Xian looked at Ding Yun, then shook her head and turned to Long Chuyu. She finally looked him in the eye. Their gazes met, and for a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in their hearts. 50520. She had changed too much. Could a person change so much in 20 years? Long Chuyu's heart was filled with emotions as he sat on the ground in a daze, looking up at that woman. Back in the day, she was also a beautiful young lady, as beautiful as a flower. How could there be such a huge change? Ding Xian looked at Ding Yun and said indifferently, even now, you still suspect that the first person mother let you kill when you were 10 years old was your twin brother? Ding Yun looked at his mother with a complicated gaze, unable to speak for a long time. However, Ding Xian said, I was indeed pregnant with twins at that time. However, your younger brother died at birth. The one you killed when you were 10 was just a secret guard. Ding Yun was stunned, but his gaze still looked at Ding Xian in disbelief. Ding Xian continued, do you still remember the child's appearance? He doesn't look like you at all, does he? No matter how ruthless I am, I can't let you kill your own brother. What about adoptive father? Why do you believe those specious rumors? Ding Xian coldly replied, I was indeed the one who killed your foster father. But he was plotting to seize my Beijing manor, so how could I possibly let him succeed? Carefree Valley and Beijing Manor are connected by marriage. Your foster father is eyeing the sphere of influence of Beijing Manor. How sincere do you think he is to you? It's just some small favors that he usually gives you. Ding Xian glanced at her son indifferently. Don't be confused by a little bit of so-called warmth. Yes, back then, he accompanied you to practice martial arts, so you have a deep relationship with him. But so what? Ding Xian's voice was extremely cold. He only values your identity. Mother, is what you said today true? When has mother ever lied to you? Ding Xian glanced at Ding Yun, then shook her head and turned to Long Chuyu. She finally looked him in the eye. Their gazes met, and for a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in their hearts. Chapter 47-69. Even if Madame was jealous, it was impossible for her to do such a thing. How could she poison Xian and even harm Yun-her? Long Chuyu subconsciously shook his head. When his gaze met Ding Xian's, his entire body couldn't help but turn cold. Ding Xian was actually looking at him with such a hateful gaze. Long Chuyu hurriedly turned to look at Ding Yun, as if he wanted to verify something. He looked at his son with pleading eyes. Yun-er, tell father, is what your mother said true? What love-severing poison, was it really passed to Yun-er through his mother's womb? Ding Yun's gaze coldly swept across his face, so what if I tell you, can you avenge me? Long Chuyu immediately looked like he had suffered a great blow, then turned to look at Madame Long who was locked in the vines. Madam, why did you do this? You're asking me why I did this. Madame Long shrieked, if I didn't do this, would that bitch Ding Xian have left so willingly? You almost abandoned me for a woman from a lower star field. What else can't I do? Long Chuyu looked at her with a face full of shock. Ding Yun saw this and only felt that it was extremely funny. He felt that his father was really funny. He was clearly the one who had a foot in both boats, wavering left and right to harm others, yet he revealed an expression of, I'm also a victim. It was really comical and laughable. Ding Yun shook his head, too lazy to say anything more to him. He turned and walked to Madame Long's side, then heard Long Chuyu call him mournfully from behind. Yun-er. Yun-er. Long Chuyu asked with a face full of pain, does the love-severing poison affect you? Ding Yun felt that his father was becoming more and more laughable. He turned and gave him a charitable glance, what do you think? That's the one and only love-severing poison in the world, do you think it will affect me? I've had poison in my body since I was young. When I was young, the poison would flare up on the 1st and 15th of every month. In order to survive, I had no choice but to fuse with the fire Qilin Fanged snake's poison. It was extremely dangerous, who could I tell? You think I wanted to fuse with this snake's poison and become a detestable demonic cultivator? I'm doing this to survive. Ding Yun looked at him coldly. Yun-er. Long Chuyu cried out sorrowfully, father did not know about this. Father, now that you know who the culprit is, will you stand up for me? Can you solve this problem for me? Can you make your wife hand over the antidote to the love-severing poison? Long Chuyu was left speechless by his series of questions. Ding Yun looked at him indifferently as a sneer appeared on his lips. You can't do anything. Brother. Sikong Fuling walked briskly to her side. The people in the front and rear courtyards have all been arrested and there are still more than 200 people left. They are all old, weak, women, and children. I know. Ding Yun nodded. They only received the housewarming notice today. I'm afraid they won't even have time to cry before we take them all down. The remaining old, weak, women and children in the clan would also have to move to the cold valley of the River of Forgetfulness. But to them, the cold valley of the River of Forgetfulness was no different from hell on earth. They might not be able to return alive after going there. Sikong Fuling looked at Madame Long with disdain. Did this woman confess? Did she say how to cure the poison? Chapter 4770. Brother, do you want me to use some special methods to let her enjoy herself? Sikong Fuling took out a flute and smiled sweetly in Madame Long's direction. However, even though her smile was beautiful, it made Madame Long's hair stand on end. She was horrified. Ding Yun reached out and patted her shoulder. Then I'll leave it to you, Fuling. All right. Sikong Fuling grinned and placed the flute in front of her. Just as she was about to blow the nightmare demonic flute, she heard Long Chuyu's pitiful cries behind her. Yun, can you let Ji, and Shang Yun go? The two of them never had anything to do with you. Sikong Fuling smirked and interrupted Long Chuyu's begging with the sound of the flute. On the other side, Long Shangyun and Long Huan's group, who were heading toward the Forgetful River's cold valley, were surrounded by the demon sect's followers. The two parties began an intense battle on the sea. More than half of Long Huan's 3,000 personal guards had been exhausted in the previous battle. Now that they were surrounded by the demon sect's fresh troops, they were naturally defeated. Long Shangyun's lips were slightly pale. She held the bottle of soul-calming pills that Arbor had given her tightly. Her eyes were filled with anxiety as she kept glancing at Long Huan, who was fighting with the others. Long Huan was being surrounded by 3 Mystique Venerable rank experts and was barely able to defend himself. If not for the people from Aohai protecting him with their lives, he would have been captured long ago. Long Shangyun could tell that this group of people was very ruthless. Every strike was fatal to her brother. They did not seem to be out to capture people. They seemed to be out to kill. Long Shangyun's eyes narrowed slightly as she watched one of the men in black slash Long Huan's arm with his saber. Brother. The instant Long Shangyun cried out in surprise, 2 or 3 impolite gazes swept towards her face. Seeing those people rushing towards her, Long Shangyun started to panic. Who could she beat in her current state? She would still be captured easily. She could not implicate her brother. With that thought, Long Shangyun immediately got up with difficulty and jumped into the sea, sinking into the water with a splash. Long Huan looked back and hurriedly called out, Jiang Song, quickly go and take a look. The dragon guard named Jiang Song immediately jumped down with Long Shangyun. At the same time, the entire ship rumbled. A few Mystique Venerable rank cultivators threw divine power orbs onto the ship with cold expressions. Soon, the entire ship was set ablaze. Long Shangyun had just popped her head out when she was blasted out by the shockwaves from the ship. The last thing she saw was Aohai pouncing on her brother and blocking a knife for him. However, in the end, the cold blade still pierced through the elder brother's chest. Brother. Long Shangyun's head was hit by the fragments of the ship, and she sank into the water. By the time Ding Yun left Ding Xian, Long Chuyu, and the others behind and walked out of the house, the sun had already set in the west. The sunset glow faintly shrouded the horizon, revealing a somewhat dense color. Look at what you've done. A cold rebuke came from outside the door. Ding Yun looked up and his gaze landed on a man wearing a silver ghost mask who was rushing over. Ding Yun smiled nonchalantly. Since the hall master is here, let's talk in the side room. Sect Master Ding, you're being very unkind. Chapter 4771. The red-clothed man leaned to the side and abruptly interjected, "You took action in advance but didn't say anything. How do you expect us to continue cooperating with you?" Cold Master Ding smiled faintly. Young Master is joking. This is a personal grudge between me and the Dragon Clan, so there's no need for everyone to intervene. The Ghostface Hall Master glared at him coldly. Cold Master Ding, you don't need me to trouble myself to remind you, right? We're in a cooperative relationship. Please inform us before you take action. Okay. Ding Yun readily nodded in agreement. Everyone, just treat this as an accident that I didn't consider carefully before taking action. I'll definitely inform everyone in a timely manner in the future. What do you plan to do now? Fan Mang and Fan Yu, who followed the Ghostface Hall Master here, couldn't help but frown. I'll resolve some old grudges between me and the Dragon Clan, Ding Yun said with a smile. Everyone should be aware of my relationship with the Dragon Clan of Wangchuan. Gong Songfeng gazed deeply at Ding Yun, a faintly discernible coldness creeping onto his lips. This humble one truly admires Cult Master Ding's meticulous planning. Ding Yun raised his brows noncommittally. Gong Songfeng was about to speak with a fake smile when he saw several demonic cult disciples rush in. When they saw them present, they were clearly taken aback and hesitated on whether they should go forward to report. Is there something that you can't say? Fan Meng said coldly, Cult Master Ding, you sent people to secretly search for something on the surface of the sea. Are you still trying to hide it from us? Ding Yun smiled. Vice Hall Master Meng worries too much. You secretly prepared over 1,000 divine stone cannons to attack the Dragon Clan of Wangchuan. Attacking at the same time, you must have affected Jojo on the surface of the sea, right? Ding Yun was silent for a moment before saying teasingly, Ayaya, I was wondering why you came in such a hurry. So you came for that stoic face. If it's because of this, you can rest assured. The little stoic has been a little fellow with good karma from beginning to end. Nothing can happen to her except for anyone else. Gong Songfeng sneered. You're truly ruthless. Ding Yun raised his eyebrows. No one would have thought that you were the one who had been watching the situation from the sidelines. Fan Mang looked at Cult Master Ding in front of her with an indifferent expression. You deceived them so miserably. Fan Mang's lips curled into a sinister smile. That Dragon Clan leader actually believed your nonsense. He thought that as the Dragon Clan's leader, he really had the ability to release that human-shaped sacred beast. Young Master Ding looked at Fan Meng with interest and suddenly laughed loudly. It's her own stupidity, all right? I'm just looking for two people to intentionally or unintentionally mention the legendary humanoid sacred beast in the sacrificial sea abyss to her. It's that old woman's selfishness and greed that's causing trouble. If it wasn't for that, how could she possibly be used by me? Ding Yun sneered. After all, this is our last chance, isn't it? What's more, your heavenly fate also played an indelible role in this. Ding Yun said with a chuckle, after all, I didn't refine the medicinal liquid that made the humanoid sacred beast go berserk. It was provided by your organization. Speaking of which, the heavenly fate truly had many talents. It was truly surprising that they could refine a medicinal liquid that could make a sacred beast go berserk. Chapter 4772. If it weren't for your esteemed organization's top-notch frenzy-inducing medicinal liquid, I wouldn't have been able to do it. That bottle of catalytic medicine in the old hag's hands wouldn't have been able to accomplish anything, all right? What a joke. That old hag actually thought that her group of useless clansmen could really refine the ingredients needed to make the frenzy-inducing medicinal liquid from the holy beast Black Dragon. Ding Yun couldn't help but snicker. What a joke. The reason why the frenzy-inducing medicinal liquid in her hands could successfully make that snake-bodied and human-shaped holy beast go berserk was because he secretly replaced the original bottles of useless medicinal liquid for her. The reason why the frenzy-inducing medicinal liquid Long Qian threw out was due to the contributions of that group of genius alchemists from All-Seer. Fan Mang looked at young Sir Ding coldly. You're really quite ruthless. Back then, you secretly summoned that human-shaped holy beast in the dark in front of the little stoic. Weren't you worried that the holy beast would tear her apart? What do I have to worry about? Darkness flashed through young Sir Ding's eyes. Wouldn't someone risk their life to protect her? Not only Fan Meng, but Gong Songfeng's eyes also involuntarily narrowed. So, this guy was certain that Mo Lian would risk her life to save the little stoic. His true target was actually that crown prince of the divine province. Everyone looked at this cult master Ding, whose mind was full of twists and turns, in astonishment. Gong Songfeng was even more vigilant. He actually felt like he was asking a tiger for its skin when cooperating with this great cult master who was so adept at scheming. Ding Yun smiled faintly. See, I've told you everything. Then can you tell me where the little stoic went? He practically didn't need to summon those demonic cult disciples who hurried over for questioning to know that they definitely couldn't find the little fellow in the sea of forgetfulness. Could it be that this facial paralysis hid in his portable godly domain at the critical moment? This wasn't impossible, Ding Yun speculated inwardly. Fan Yu shook her head. We searched the surface of the sea but couldn't find any trace of her. It seems that she was thrown very far away because of that tremor. Fan Yu paused. Or perhaps she returned to her portable divine realm. Ding Yun smiled faintly. I'm guessing that she probably went into hiding. This little guy was as cunning as a fox, slippery and hard to catch. Send people to search everywhere. Cult Master Ding sighed. No one knew where he had run off to. When Arbor regained consciousness, it was probably night time. Because when he opened his eyes, everything before him was pitch black. He hurriedly flipped over and sat up, vigilantly trying to pull out a feral from his conscious. However, as soon as he used his divine sense, he felt an incessant pain in his head, and he immediately became vigilant. When the little stoic recalled Master reminding her that she couldn't use her divine conscious for a while, she couldn't help but crease her brows. After groping around in her sleeves, the little stoic expressionlessly took out a bottle of soul-calming pills, poured out a pill, and tossed it into her mouth to chew. His eyes suddenly lit up. This pill was actually tangerine-flavored. It was strangely delicious. The door opened slightly, and she sensed someone approaching in the darkness. The little stoic groped around the low cabinet next to her pillow, casually picked up a bowl, and threw it at the newcomer. Who's sneaking around? That person clearly didn't expect the stoic to be awake and was caught off guard, almost getting hit in the head by the medicine bowl. However, she heard a crisp pop in the darkness, and a candle flame was lit. The little stoic was involuntarily startled when she saw the newcomer. It's you. Chapter 47-73. Fifth young Master Qin glanced down. He saw that the bowl of porridge he was holding had now shattered into several pieces and pitifully fell to the ground. There was simply no way to salvage the situation. He couldn't resist lifting his head and glaring at Arbor in a huff. Why are you so violent, destroying and attacking people at the drop of a hat? Arbor glanced at him in surprise before casting a wary glance behind him. Why are you here? Who's outside? My Chiao, why are you still so unadorably vigilant? I'm just passing by. A frivolous voice was heard from outside the door. Arbor knew who the visitor was just by hearing that voice. His small face immediately put on his trademark expressionless face, and he didn't even bat an eyelid as he coldly said to the door, "Get in here." Eldest young Master Qin strode through the door, his handsome face beaming with amusement. "Long time no see, my Chiao." The little stoic's hand was as quick as lightning, and she threw a handful of small nails at him without a second word. Eldest young Master Qin's handsome face that was like a spring breeze contorted slightly. He placed one hand on the door frame and forcefully flipped his body outside. A row of black nails as thick as a pinky finger was nailed into the door in a very consistent manner. A woman's shriek was subsequently heard, accompanied by hurried footsteps. The group of subordinates frantically called out, "Young master, young master." They scrambled to unsheath their swords from their waists, looking ready for battle. When did an assassin sneak onto the ship and attack their eldest young master viciously without a second word? Eldest young Master Qin twitched his mouth and waved his hand helplessly. It's fine, it's fine. There's no assassin, there's nothing at all. Withdraw." Eldest young Master Qin pacified his nervous personal bodyguards. "Withdraw. What do you mean it's fine?" Arbor heard a woman's shrill shriek from outside the door. "Eldest cousin, I told you not to save that person inside. She's so vicious and doesn't know what's good for her. She doesn't have the slightest bit of gratitude, so what's the point of saving her?" When Arbor heard the words, "eldest cousin," he couldn't help but roll his eyes at the sky. She had come. After parting on Seekong Star, his cousin Yang Fengyan, whom he hadn't seen for many years, had actually been brought to the 3 continents by the Qin estate. It was indeed easier to get things done when there were people in the residence. With Yang Fengyan's terrible talent and cultivation at that time, even if she died in this lifetime, it would be impossible for her to climb the heavenly stairway to the middle 6 prefectures, let alone wander around the 3 continents. So talent and whatnot could not be generalized. Many people who were hundreds of times more talented than Yang Fengyan could not obtain the qualifications to come to the upper realm just because their family's influence was weak. "I already said it's fine. What's the fuss about?" The eldest young master's voice was tinged with impatience. Obviously, he was not in the mood to continue arguing with Yang Fengyan and the others. "Miss Yang, you don't need to worry too much about our eldest young master. You just need to take care of yourself." A woman's indifferent voice sounded, covering Yang Fengyan's screams. "You're just a little concubine by my cousin's side. How dare you talk to me like that? Do you believe that I won't slap you?" "All right." Eldest young Sir Qin pressed his aching temples. "Everyone, return." Yang Fengyan stomped her feet. "Eldest cousin. No way, I'm worried about you. I have to stay and watch that little bitch inside to prevent her from making a move on you again." Qin Xian's expression instantly darkened. Chapter 47-74. Yang Fengyan shrunk her neck and instantly realized that she had said the wrong thing. She pursed her lips and bashfully said in a small voice, I was also worried about cousin. Who do you think you can control with your mediocre martial arts skills?" Eldest young Sir Qin didn't leave any face for his cousin at all and mocked her without any trace of politeness. "With your fancy moves, you won't even be able to withstand a single punch from the little stoic." The eldest young Sir said impatiently, "If you don't want to die, then scram further away." Yang Fengyan stomped her feet indignantly. Her cultivation back then was just a bit higher than mine. "Cousin, don't exaggerate, all right? Are you sure she's just a bit higher than you?" Eldest young Sir Chin's handsome face frosted over as he glanced irritably at cousin Yang. He scoffed. All right, don't cause trouble here. Hurry and leave. If it weren't for his father's sake, would he warn this idiot in front of him? Who cared if she died or not? Qin Xian turned around and walked towards the room. He hadn't taken a few steps when he heard fifth brother stutter to the little stoic, "You, how could you, kill eldest brother?" The little stoic said, "I never need a reason to kill." Fifth brother continued to stutter, You're not someone who kills without batting an eyelid. Why would you describe yourself like that?" The little stoic said, "How would you know what kind of person I am?" Fifth brother stopped stuttering and smoothly said, "You're just not good at expressing yourself. Actually, you have a pretty good heart. Otherwise, you wouldn't have saved me back then, and you wouldn't have disdained me for being troublesome while taking care of me. You saw what seventh brother did to me and even helped teach him a lesson. I know you're not that kind of bloodthirsty person." Qin Xian's footsteps paused, and he heard the little stoic scoff. "That's because you don't understand me too well." Qin Xian, why did he feel like these two people's conversation contained a bit of inexplicable humor? One stuttered while the other was as cold as a brick. Fifth brother, this child, had always disliked interacting with others, and he loathed interacting with women even more. He didn't expect that he would be able to say such a coherent sentence in front of the little stoic. "You are an extremely good person," fifth young master Qin said. Arbor, who had been labeled as a good person, silently raised his head and glanced at the fifth young master. He was too lazy to respond to him. What kind of good person was she? Don't think that she would let her guard down just because they gave her the good person card to numb her. People from the Qin estate had appeared in the river of forgetfulness, and had even coincidentally saved her. Things that were too coincidental inexplicably gave off the smell of conspiracy. "Jojo, I'm coming in." Eldest young Sir Qin shouted from outside the door, "Don't throw concealed weapons at me anymore. It was so scary just now." Arbor glanced up and saw eldest young Sir Qin stride in first, followed by young Fengyan and a somewhat familiar-looking woman. When young Fengyan saw Arbor, her eyes blazed with hatred as if she was meeting an enemy. Her pair of beautiful eyes stared fixedly at her, and she bit her lip tightly without uttering a sound. Arbor glanced at them. "Are you guys planning to put me under house arrest?" Young Fengyan was like a firecracker that ignited at the slightest spark, and she jumped up. "Who put you under house arrest?" "My eldest cousin and the others saved you out of the kindness of their hearts, so why aren't you the least bit grateful? Instead, you're acting so overbearing. Why are you in the sea of forgetfulness?" Arbor glared sharply at Qin Xian. Chapter 4775. Eldest young Sir Qin smiled helplessly. Just as he was about to explain, he heard young Fengyan chirping, "Woman, you're so unreasonable. Could it be that your family owns this sea of forgetfulness? If you can come, then we can't come. We, the Qin estate's people, can't go anywhere." Young Fengyan glanced at the little stoic complacently. "Let alone the river of forgetfulness, even if it's the holy domain, we can go there if we want." Arbor threw her a severe gaze. "You don't know the rules. I'm talking to your eldest young sir, is it your place to interrupt? Slap yourself 10 times. Everyone, young Fengyan's face instantly turned red and green, as if it had been painted green. She was so angry that smoke seemed about to come out of her head. "You, don't go too far." Young Fengyan had only spoken halfway when she saw the little stoic raise her hand. A terrifyingly huge force pushed in front of her. Young Fengyan screamed and reflexively wanted to hide behind someone else, but how could the little stoic allow her to escape since she was the one being targeted? A crisp slap landed on her face from a distance. Young Feng Yan fell headfirst out of the door in a very sorry state. Her head probably hit the ground, as it made a rather dull thud. Eldest young Sir Qin rolled his eyes helplessly. He already told her to stay outside and not follow in, but she refused to listen and insisted on coming in to challenge the little stoic's bottom line. It was as if she was seeking death, burrowing in to take this slap. What else could he say? She truly forgot the pain after the wound healed. She was simply so stupid that he couldn't bear to look at her directly. She had completely forgotten how she had suffered at the little stoic's hands back then in the Qin estate, right? Perhaps young Feng Yan was dazed from the fall, for she didn't make a sound for a long time. Arbor looked up at eldest young Sir Qin and asked suspiciously, "Why did you appear here so coincidentally?" "I've been here for more than half a month." The eldest young Sir rolled his eyes irritably and walked to her without consulting anyone. He raised his hand and rudely poked her head. "Don't always suspect others. I don't have a trace of malice toward you. What are you doing in the Sea of Forgetfulness? If it was said to be sightseeing, then it would be too far away. Moreover, in this boundless Sea of Forgetfulness, there was no reason to stop." Eldest young Master Qin smiled at her. "Our estate has received news that the largest pond Lotus Sacred Realm in the River of Forgetfulness will open in half a month." Ahem. Eldest young Master coughed in embarrassment. "I'm definitely not the one who came here to scout. But I saw that I had nothing to do, so..." Arbor looked at him with disdain, and the young master looked back at her innocently. "You do have a lot of free time. Jojo." Eldest young Sir Qin threw her a coquettish glance with a grin. "Tell me, how vigilant are you? No matter how I look at it, none of them look like good people." Arbor was silent for a long time. Suddenly, he said expressionlessly, "Why do you keep winking at me? I can see that your eyes are clear and spirited. You don't seem to have any symptoms of an eye disease. Do you want me to take your pulse?" The 5 young masters were speechless. Eldest young Sir huffed, Jojo, I'm not playing with you anymore. You really are an unromantic blockhead." Arbor glanced at him expressionlessly. "Then do you want to take my pulse?" "I'll take your pulse." Eldest young Sir Qin couldn't resist rolling his eyes. Chapter 4776. He silently ridiculed the little stoic in his mind. Not only is this stoic slow-witted, but she also can't see people. I wonder what's going on. Take him, for example. Even if the Qin estate's eldest young Sir, who was as beautiful as a flower, intentionally loitered in front of Sir Jojo all day long, the little stoic would definitely turn a blind eye to him. "Want to eat?" Sir Jojo's shout brought eldest young Sir Qin's wandering thoughts back. When he returned to his senses and met Arbor's pitch-black eyes, eldest young Sir involuntarily chuckled. "Okay, I'll instruct people to prepare it right away. You fainted from the divine stone cannon earlier, so you can't eat too much random food. How about I cook you a bowl of plain porridge?" Just as 5th young Sir finished speaking, he saw the little stoic turn around and shake her head at him. She said resolutely, "Want to eat?" 5th young Sir couldn't help but want to laugh when he saw her determined expression. Arbor said expressionlessly, "I want to eat red braised pork." 5th young Sir originally wanted to tell her that this dish was too greasy and that she was more suited to eat bland dishes. In the end, when he saw the little stoic's frozen expression, for some reason, the words that reached his mouth actually turned into, "Okay. I'll go take a look in the kitchen." 5th young Sir fled in defeat. Arbor was baffled, not understanding what was going on with 5th young Sir Qin. Seeing that 5th young Sir also followed him out, the little stoic then raised her hand to check her pulse. She wanted to check her body's condition. Why was she so weak that she couldn't even touch meat? She also didn't know which quack had prescribed her a prescription while she was unconscious, saying that she was suited to eat bland food. She couldn't help but be taken aback when she checked her pulse. Unwilling to give up, the little stoic then checked her pulse 3 times in a row before finally confirming one thing. Her pulse was smooth and round, like a bead on a plate. This was clearly a pregnancy pulse. Just by looking at her expression, it was absolutely impossible to tell that she was agitated. Who would have expected that her heart was surging abnormally right now? She simply didn't dare to believe her own pulse. The little stoic was still worried and checked her pulse twice. When she lifted her head, there seemed to be a flickering luster flowing in her pair of watery eyes, and he couldn't discern the slightest hint of joy or anger. She, who had lived 2 lives, had become a mother for the first time. What kind of life experience was this? She didn't know, but if someone familiar with her was here, they would be able to tell that her breathing was erratic and her heart was beating rapidly. It should be smooth and sleek, like a pearl moving on a plate. This was clearly the pulse of pregnancy. Just by looking at her expression, it was impossible to tell that she was emotional. Who would have thought that at this moment, her heart was surging with emotions? He couldn't believe his own pulse. The little stoic was still worried and checked her pulse twice. When she lifted her head, there seemed to be a flickering luster flowing in her pair of watery eyes, and he couldn't discern the slightest hint of joy or anger. She, who had lived 2 lives, had become a mother for the first time. What kind of life experience was this? She didn't know, but if someone familiar with her was here, they would be able to tell that her breathing was erratic and her heart was beating rapidly. It should be smooth and sleek, like a pearl moving on a plate. This was clearly the pulse of pregnancy. Just by looking at her expression, it was absolutely impossible to tell that she was agitated. Who would have thought that her heart was surging abnormally right now? He simply didn't dare to believe his own pulse. The little stoic was still worried and checked her pulse twice. When she lifted her head, there seemed to be a flickering luster flowing in her pair of watery eyes, and he couldn't make out the slightest hint of joy or anger. She, who had lived 2 lives, had become a mother for the first time. What kind of life experience was this? She didn't know, but if someone familiar with her was here, they would be able to tell that her breathing was erratic and her heart was beating rapidly. Chapter 47-77. He especially did not want to talk to this fellow beside him. This fellow would occasionally tell him, "My Jojo misses me, my Jojo misses me, my Jojo misses me, what is my Jojo doing now?" So annoying, so long-winded. Only he had Jojo. Tui. How long have we been walking, Peach Blossom? Mo Lien was extremely bored and asked again after walking for a short distance. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was speechless. Why did he not want to talk to this fellow for some reason? "It's been 2 days, He-chin replied expressionlessly. In the pitch-black darkness, Mo Lien did not notice He-chen's foul expression and continued to say casually, "I wonder where that stinky human snake has run off to." In these 2 days, they could sense a trace of his aura from time to time. As they chased after him, they could always notice that the human snake's aura was faintly discernible and somewhat intermittent. That fellow was also a cunning fellow. Knowing that he was injured, he quickly found a place to escape. How could there be such a good thing? Taking advantage of someone's illness to take their life had always been their style. If they did not get rid of him now, when would they? He-chin kicked something round under his feet. It rolled on the ground covered with gravel and stones, making a gurgling sound. In such a dark and silent atmosphere, it seemed a little frightening. Mo Lien narrowed her eyes and looked over. She spread out her divine perception and caught the object on the ground. It was a human skull. The two of them looked at each other in the dark, vigilance rising in their hearts. Could it be that there was still a ferocious beast hiding in the darkness ahead? The further they went, the more grotesquely shaped heads they saw. If they were not careful, they might even step on them. He-Chin and Mo Lien looked at each other again, a trace of suspicion slipping through their hearts at the same time. Did that humanoid divine beast have such a big appetite? Other than human skulls, there were also many animal skeletons on the ground. Could it be that the humanoid divine beast had been silent underground for many years and felt especially hungry once it was released, so it ate a sumptuous dinner? Such a ferocious thing must not be allowed to remain in this world. The two of them chased for a while before Seventh Yen suddenly came out of Mo Lien's sacred beast space and said with a serious expression, "Master, I can feel it." "Where?" "It's not far ahead." As soon as the Seventh Yen finished speaking, he took the lead and dashed toward the source of the aura. As they got closer, they saw that the human-shaped snake beast had its back facing them. Its snake tail was slowly slithering on the ground. Seventh Yen stopped in his tracks. He turned around and secretly said to his master, "Master, I'll go and ambush him. I'll buy you some time." Mo Lien was stunned. Just as she was about to ask Seventh Yen what time he was trying to buy for her, she saw him fly towards the back of the humanoid sacred beast without saying a word. He was so fast that Mo Lien didn't have time to stop him. Mo Lien could not help but tense up when she saw Seventh Yen jump onto the back of the humanoid sacred beast. They had all experienced the power of this matured holy beast. Seventh Yen, that little rascal, could not possibly be a match for the humanoid sacred beast. Just as Mo Lien and Jichen's hearts were about to jump up, the humanoid sacred beast also turned around when it heard the sound of wind whistling from behind. However, when he turned around, he met Seventh Yan's big eyes and couldn't help but be stunned. Seventh Yan's fist was aimed at the back of the humanoid sacred beast. That fellow suddenly turned his head and looked at the two of them. "You? What are you doing?" Chapter 4778. What was surprising was that the moment the holy beast spoke, it cautiously took 2 steps back. That defensive little expression on her face made people feel a little annoyed. They were the ones who should be on guard. What was the meaning of this mature sacred beast's defensive expression? Seventh Yan's fist froze in midair. He put it down and glanced at him. You're awake." His words seemed to have touched the sacred beast's reverse scale. He jumped up and shouted, "I've always been awake." "When have I not been awake?" Seventh Yen chuckled and said rudely, 2 days ago, when you went crazy in the river of forgetfulness, you were already not awake." "That's because someone did something evil to me." The snake man's eyes were red with anger. He muttered, "I've guarded the river of forgetfulness for the dragon clan for so many years. In the end, they locked me up in the abyss of the sacrificial sea. When I get there, I'll skin everyone in the Wangchuan dragon clan alive." "Oh. Why would the dragon clan lock you up in the abyss of the sacrificial sea?" Seventh Yen asked curiously. Yuan Shichen replied calmly, "Isn't that obvious? Of course, it's because he went berserk. The dragon clan had no choice but to lock him up. Otherwise, if such a powerful sacred beast had stayed in the clan, the dragon clan would have been famous in the 3 continents decades ago." The humanoid sacred beast's face turned green and white. He turned and shouted at Yuan Shichen, "What the hell do you know? I went berserk because I had no choice." Unlike this time, he had been driven mad by someone with ulterior motives, causing him to lose his mind and become a knife in someone else's hand. Mo Lien said expressionlessly, "Since you've been in the abyss of the sacrificial sea for so long, you should be very familiar with the surroundings. Where is this place? Is there another path in front?" The humanoid sacred beast rolled his eyes at him. I've been sleeping in the abyss of the sacrificial sea for many years. I was woken up a few days ago. What do you think I know? Yuan Shichen and Mo Lien looked at him with disdain. What's the use of having you? He didn't even know how to use it, let alone its other effects. The two of them exchanged a few words with him and realized that the holy beast's mind had indeed cleared up. Now, in that pair of faint glazed eyes, other than a hint of alienation and indifference, there was also a trace of confusion. Their gazes fell on his hand, and only then did they realize that this fellow was holding a beast bone in his hand. He actually looked at them with a somewhat comical expression. Ma Shichen immediately pulled Mo Lien's sleeve warily. The latter hurriedly moved closer to him and stared at the holy beast warily. Seventh Yen snatched the beast bone from his hand. What are you trying to do? I'm warning you, don't think you can beat us just because you're clear-headed. The humanoid sacred beast was very angry. He raised his hand to snatch the beast bone from Seventh Yan's hand. How dare you? How dare you snatch my food? Mo Lien and Heichin held their breaths and waited. They were about to help Seventh Yen beat up the human snake when they suddenly heard the creature's cry. For a moment, they thought they were hallucinating. Ha! Something didn't feel right. Shouldn't the humanoid sacred beast rush up and fight with Seventh Yen in a fit of rage? Why did he say something so strange? An idea occurred to Heichin. He glanced at the beast bone and poked Mo Lien's arm. Don't tell me this fellow wants to roast some meat. Chapter 47-79. While Yen Qi was in a daze, the divine beast snatched the holy beast from Yen Qi's hand. The humanoid sacred beast snatched the bone from Yen Qi's hand and glared at Yen Qi angrily. If you want to eat it, go find it yourself. There are many more over there. Yen Qi, strange. Why did he feel like the mature super holy beast in front of him had walked down from a pedestal? Why did he feel like his image was disillusioned? He was as strong as he was when he wasn't calm before, but now, he was as Chinibyu as he was. Heichin hurried forward and asked tentatively, do you want me to roast it for you? The humanoid holy beast's eyes lit up slightly. He pretended to ponder for a while, glanced at Heichin, and nodded his head reluctantly. Since you want to show your filial piety so much, this old man will give you a chance. Heichin, how could he beat this old thing to death? How's your cooking? The humanoid holy beast asked seriously. It's okay, Heichin replied weakly. Jojo also praised my cooking skills before. The humanoid holy beast's eyes lit up. Then, he asked with a straight face, Jojo is that wretched girl holding the ancient holy sword, right? Why is she so hot-tempered? She slashed me with her sword without any explanation. She was crazy. Didn't she know that super holy beasts like him were hard to find in this world? How could there not be more? How could she bear to kill such a precious holy beast? She was a wretched girl who didn't care about her life. Heichin blinked. How should I address you? You juniors can just call me Senior Lanshan. Mo Lien, this guy was taking advantage of her. Why did she feel so irritated? Zhuo Lanshan glanced at Heichin. Seeing that he had borrowed some fire from the kid beside him and was roasting the holy beast bone as if he was roasting it, Zhuo Lanshan instantly felt happy. Why are we here? Mo Lien couldn't help but roll her eyes. If not for the fact that she couldn't beat this guy, she really wanted to punch and kick him. You still have the nerve to ask. It's all your fault that we're here. Just now, I spread out my divine sense and looked ahead. I found that this place is vast and deep, and I can't see the end of it. Zhuo Lanshan coiled up his snake tail and sat down on the ground. This old man has decided to rest here for a while and eat something before continuing. Mo Lien looked at him expressionlessly. Look again. See if you can sense any signs of life in front. What do you mean? Zhuolanquan asked in confusion. Yuan Shichen couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. What he meant was for you to spread out your divine sense and take a look. Are there any holy beasts stronger than you nearby? How many saint beasts do you think there are in this world? As Zhuolanquan spoke, he raised his chin proudly. A saint beast stronger than me has yet to be born. Even 7th Yen, who was standing behind him, could not help but roll his eyes at the snake man. What's wrong with this beast? When he didn't speak and just fought, he felt quite cold. His expression was indifferent and cold, and his moves were quite ruthless. The defense of his copper skin and iron bones was also very shocking. Basically, he was indeed in an invincible state. But even so, who would praise himself so immodestly? There are so many corpses piled up nearby. Something powerful must have passed by here. It could be a human, or a beast. It could be neither human nor beast. Only then did Zhuolanquan have a look of realization. Chapter 4780. Oh, that's fine too. After this old man is full, this old man will use my divine perception to check if there are any dangers in the surroundings. After a few words, Zhuolanquan's gaze was completely attracted by the fragrant roasted beast bones in Shichen's hands. There was a large piece of meat wrapped around the beast bones, and it was indeed enough for a normal person to eat. But this was a mature sacred beast, so how could such a small piece of meat be enough to fill the gaps between his teeth? Hence, Shichen roasted 11 pieces of beast bones consecutively for this fellow before he was finally full. After eating his fill, Zhuolanquan looked very happy. All right, let this old man take a look. His voice suddenly paused, and his ears twitched. Seems like something is approaching. I wonder if husband has any food to eat. Sir Jojo muttered to himself as he held a piece of red braised pork in his hand. Husband and rotten peach blossom fell into that pit, so I wonder what the situation is now. No matter what, I still have to wait at the entrance of the sacrificial sea's abyss. Perhaps I can wait for Jojo's lotus and rotten peach blossom there. Is the food not to your liking? The 5th young master's gentle voice sounded in her ears. Arbor returned to his senses and expressionlessly glanced at 5th young master Qin. He shook his head and set down his bowl and chopsticks in passing. I'm full. You didn't eat much. And, it's enough. It was fine as long as there was enough nutrition. From now on, she had to take better care of her body and protect herself and the baby. I wonder what the baby looks like. It wouldn't be good if it looked like her and had a paralyzed face. It was better to look like Lotus. When Jojo's lotus casually smiled at others, it really looked like a mountain flower in full bloom. No good, that wasn't good either. It was too ostentatious. Jojo's lotus couldn't casually smile at others. Forget it, there was no need to think so much. The top priority was to leave this place first. Although eldest Qin saved her, she just wasn't willing to have anything to do with the Qin estate's people. Forget it. He saved her, so she had to express her gratitude. After a while, she would go to the storage talisman to take a look. If there were any pills suitable for 5th Qin, she would just gift them to him on the other end. Xiao Mu's thoughts were hazy, and her thoughts were in a mess. On the other side, 5th young master Qin called out to her weakly several times, but he didn't receive any response. She couldn't help but look at her curiously. Miss Xiao. Joe. Arbor suddenly came back to his senses and looked at him. Oh, it's nothing. It wasn't very polite for her to completely let her mind wander when other people were talking to her. Xiao Mu nodded at the 5th young master before asking absent-mindedly, have you been feeling better recently? Yes, much better. When eldest young Sir Chin walked in, he heard the fifth young Sir stuttering as he conversed with the little stoic. Jojo, we've gathered first-hand information on Forget Chuan. Do you want to hear it? Arbor raised a brow. Could it be that the huge explosion on the surface of the sea earlier was because something happened to the Forget Chuan Dragon Clan's land? Did someone assemble many divine stone cannons to attack the Forget Chuan clan's land? But didn't Long Huan and Long Shangyun already leave the Forget Chuan clan's land? Why were these people attacking Forget Chuan again? It was the demonic cult's cult master, Ding Yun, who gathered people and launched an all-out attack on the Forget Chuan clan's land. Eldest young Sir Chin smiled at her. It's really lively. Arbor couldn't help but be startled. How's Forget Chuan? Chapter 4781. We received news that the demonic sect's young master Ding not only led people to surround the Wangchuan clan, but also captured Long Chuyu and his wife. In addition, he also sent people to deal with Long Jiang and Long Shangyun. Arbor was taken aback when she heard this. Her fingers tightened slightly as she asked expressionlessly, why did he capture Long Jiang and Long Shangyun? Eldest young master shook his head with a smile. Not capture, kill. Arbor's eyes widened abruptly. After a long pause, she said, what other news did you receive? Spit it all out at once. Who exactly did this fellow learn this habit of speaking half and leaving half unsaid? Eldest young Master Chin couldn't help but be amused when he saw her serious expression. This fellow simply dragged a stool over and sat down beside her. Crossing his long legs, he smiled at her and said, hey, how did you know that I know more than this? Arbor glanced at him expressionlessly, too lazy to talk to him. Was there even a need to think about it? Although eldest Chin, this fellow, had a mischievous and unreliable appearance on the surface, he was still extremely meticulous in his work. Since he sent people to keep an eye on the Wangchuan Dragon clan, he must be paying attention to every detail, big or small. Okay. I'll tell you everything. Eldest young Master Chin nodded and said with a smile, the news I received is that during the encirclement, Long Jiang perished, and Long Shangyun was smashed into the Sea of Wangchuan by the ship's fragments. She hasn't been found yet. Arbor reflexively clenched two fingers. Qin Xian lowered his head to look at her small hands and said with a sigh, Jojo, you still care about them very much. I've already sent people to search for Long Shangyun. Don't worry, as long as she's still breathing, the people I sent to search for her will be able to save her. He knew that this little fellow was a stubborn and soft-hearted little fellow. That was why he had sent people to search for that girl Long Shangyun earlier. However, the Sea of Wangchuan was extremely large. If Long Shangyun transformed into a mermaid and hid in some underwater cave, it wouldn't be easy to find her. Ding Yun's people are also searching for her now. It seems that he wants to see her alive or dead. Eldest young Sir Chin sighed and said, your uncle Anand probably won't have a good ending in his hands. Arbor was silent for a moment before he nodded indifferently. Long Chuyu was Ding Yun's biological father. As his son, he did not feel sorry for his father, so it was even more impossible for her, his nominal niece, to meddle in other people's business. Lord Jojo didn't want to get involved in the trivial matters of the Forgotten River Dragon clan. It was just that Long Shangyun was a little too innocent after all. Don't worry, Jojo. I've already sent many people to look for her. I'll be able to rescue Miss Long before Ding Yun does. Zither young master said with a smile. Arbor glanced at him and said coldly, I'm not worried about her. Eldest young Sir Chin stood up with a smile. All right. You're not worried about her. Who can you fool with that look in your eyes? He was obviously very worried about Long Shangyun, but he liked to pretend that he didn't care. The eldest young master smiled and shook his head. Jojo, rest well. I'll come and see you later. Arbor really wanted to shout at him, don't come and find me if there's nothing. But he heard this zither young master say with a chuckle, I'll bring you the latest news of the Forgotten River Dragon clan when the time comes. Hence, Xiao Mu didn't say anything. Forgotten River Dragon Clan Water Prison. Sikong Fuling put down the demonic flute in her hands and looked smilingly at the girl who was tied to the iron pillar with her head drooping. Chapter 4782. This woman had been hanging from the iron pillar in this position for more than 6 to 10 hours. She had been in this half-dead state the entire time. Sikong Fuling reached out and snapped her fingers. Immediately, the jingling sound of pendants could be heard. Two beautiful women with half of their jade arms exposed and dressed in colorful silk walked in while dragging a wooden barrel. They bowed to Sikong Fuling. Saintess. Sikong Fuling nodded and looked at the drooping woman with a faint sneer in her eyes. Madam Long, you're quite stubborn. Come, move the people in. Madam Long abruptly raised her head and stared fixedly at Sikong Fuling with bloodshot eyes, as though she wanted to swallow her whole. Her eyes were filled with a cold fury and venomous light as she stared fixedly at Sikong Fuling and didn't move away for a long while. Sikong Fuling didn't take it to heart as she smiled and waved her small hand. Hurry up, I have excellent news to tell Madam Long in a while. The two beautiful women walked up with graceful expressions and unlocked the iron chains on Madam Long's body. They pulled her down from the iron pillar and dragged her to the large wooden barrel. As soon as the wooden barrel's lid was opened, a layer of chill rushed over. Madam Long shuddered unexpectedly as she looked up at Sikong Fuling with a look of disbelief. What are you doing? Madam Long's voice was filled with uncontrollable fear and despair. I want to see Chu Yu. I want to see Ding Yun's father. I think Madam Long still hasn't figured out what your current status is. Sikong Fuling smiled at her. That smile was so cold and terrifying that Madam Long couldn't help but shudder violently. Do you understand that you're a prisoner now? A prisoner of my demonic sect. Sikong Fuling smiled coldly at her. You don't have the right to ask for this and that, Madam Long shuddered all over. Don't be fooled by the two maidservants who were holding her up because they were very strong. It didn't take much effort for them to drag her to the wooden barrel. Mrs. Long shook her head again and again. Her cultivation was low to begin with, and now that Ding Yun had sealed the last bit of spirit energy in her body, she was like an ordinary person who was at the mercy of others. She couldn't resist at all. The two maids dragged Madam Long and roughly lifted her up, throwing her into the bucket. Two pairs of hands pressed down on her shoulders, forcing her to sink deeper into the bucket. Her legs sank into a pile of bone-chilling ice. How does it feel, Madam Long? Sikong Fuling smiled faintly at her. Let you stay in this bone-piercing ice spirit for 2 hours. Oh, no, it will only take about 1 incense stick's worth of time. Take a guess, will your legs still be able to walk? Madam Long's pupils constricted as she screamed, I want to see Ding Yun. Let me go. You dare to treat me like this? I want to see Ding Yun, I want to see Ding Yun. Sikong Fuling smiled at her and picked up a fist-sized ice spirit. She crushed it into powder and threw it at Madam Long's face. Madam Long instantly shuddered as that iciness drilled into her neck. Madam Long, your son, Long Jing, is dead. Madam Long widened her eyes in disbelief and repeatedly shook her head as she shouted sternly, impossible. My Jing went to the Forgotten River Cold Valley. He can't, clap. Sikong Fuling clapped her hands twice and chuckled as she instructed the guards who walked in. Chapter 4783. Madame Long doesn't believe that the young master of the Wangchuan dragon clan is dead. Bring him in and let Madame Long take a look. As soon as she finished speaking, those guards immediately moved Long Huan's corpse in and threw it in front of Madame Long's wooden barrel. The corpse had already been blasted into bits and pieces by the god's stone cannon, but half of his face was still intact. It was indeed her Huan. Madame Long's eyes widened as she cried out in pain. My son. Her vision turned black, and she fainted. Sikong Fuling shrugged and threw a look at the two maidservants beside her. The two gorgeous maidservants grabbed Madame Long's hair and slapped her face twice. Madame Long slowly woke up, only to hear a cold voice ringing in her ears. Madam, if you don't want your son to be unable to rest in peace after death, then you have to cooperate with me, right? What do you mean? Sikong Fuling reached out to take a small bottle of green medicinal liquid from the guard and looked at Madame Long with feigned surprise. You don't know. Tianyun has a medicinal liquid that can revive a dead person after drinking it. It's just that the appearance of a walking corpse might not be that beautiful. Madame Long shuddered as she stared at Sikong Fuling in disbelief. My son is already dead, but Ding Yun, that heartless and unscrupulous person, still won't let him off. Sikong Fuling's eyes turned cold. You can finally question me now. Then, when you harmed my big brother, who could he complain to about the pain and suffering he went through? Look at you, who are you putting on that righteous face for? My eldest brother was only an infant back then, but he was killed by you. Don't you know how much suffering and exhaustion he has suffered all these years? I'm just here to settle this score with you. Shouldn't I? Madame Long couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Sikong Fuling impatiently interrupted, her eyes filled with cold fury. If you don't obediently tell me the antidote for the love-severing poison, even if your son Long Qian is dead, I can still bring him back to life and order him to be a slave or a servant. Be careful, holy maiden. This woman is accumulating power to self-destruct. The two guards had sharp eyes and immediately saw that the wooden barrel had swelled and deformed. They hurriedly shouted. Sikong Fuling hastily took a few steps back. She had only taken a few steps out of the water prison when she heard a loud, dull sound coming from the water prison. When Madame Long self-destructed, Sikong Fuling only heard that woman shriek, since I can't protect my son, then I will die with him. Sikong Fuling could not help feeling anxious. It didn't matter if that woman died, but she had to leave the antidote for the love-severing poison before she died. Madame Long's angry voice came from the air. Ding Yun, the love-severing poison in your body can't be cured. You are destined to be alone for the rest of your life. You can't fall in love with anyone, otherwise you will die a horrible death. Ha 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 ha. The madam finally ended the farce with a series of crazy laughter. When the tremors subsided a little, Sikong Fuling hurriedly rushed into the water prison again, only to see that the prison was littered with rubble and Madame Long and Long Huan were nowhere to be seen. The two of them had been at the center of the explosion, and with Madame Long's explosion, they should have disappeared. Only a small pile of bone fragments was left on the ground, with smoke and dust billowing in the middle. Sikong Fuling's expression changed and she held her breath. Her bright eyes emitted two cold glints as she clenched her fists tightly and growled, "They got off too easy." Chapter 4784. Arbor liked to check her pulse now that she was free, and she checked her pulse more than 3 times a day. Later on, she felt that she was truly too nervous, which was detrimental to her mother and fetus's physical and mental health, so she simply took out a medical book and calmed her mind while reading. It was late yesterday, so eldest Qin didn't come over to disturb her again. She slept quite well last night and casually ate some plain porridge and side dishes. It was almost noon now, but Arbor still didn't see any trace of eldest young Sir Qin, so she couldn't help but be curious. Could it be that some unforeseen event happened at the River of Forgetfulness? Although Arbor said she wasn't worried, she was still worried about Long Xiangyun's safety. This little lady was even younger than her, and her family's circumstances had suddenly changed, so she didn't know where she had drifted off to. It's fine if I bring the things in. You may withdraw. An arrogant voice came from outside the door. Miss Yang. The two maidservants' delicate voices rang out one after the other. The young sir has ordered that no one is allowed to casually disturb the honored guest inside. Young Fengyan glared and stomped her leg. What, you dare to disobey me? Don't forget, I'm the Qin Estate's cousin, miss. Be careful, or you'll have to bear the consequences. The two maidservants looked at each other in dismay, simultaneously thunderstruck by this cousin miss. How should they put it? This cousin miss was indeed their Qin Estate's cousin miss, but her relationship with the Qin Estate's main family was very distant. She was only a woman from a branch family in the Lower Star Domain. If the young sir hadn't stayed in the Lower Star Domain all this time, how could he have gotten involved with this country bumpkin woman? One of the maidservants pursed her lips and secretly winked at the other maidservant, hinting for her to look at Yang Fengyan's arrogant face. It was truly laughable. She was merely a woman from a branch family. She was lucky enough to get involved with a young sir and thought she was someone important. After being brought to the main family, she didn't lead a good life. Every day, she would throw, hit, and drink at them, the servants. Just looking at her was detestable. Move aside. Young Fengyan went up and pushed that maidservant, directly squeezing between the two of them. She even snatched the tray from a maidservant's hands and walked in with a plate of food. She heavily threw the food on the table in front of the little stoic. Clang! 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 A series of sounds rang out. The originally perfectly covered bowls were all thrown askew by her, and the soup inside spilled out. Tell me, what will it take for you to scram from our Qin Estate's boat? How much do you want before you leave? Young Fengyan crossed her legs and sat down in front of Arbor. She took out a soul coin card and slapped it in front of Arbor. She looked at her coldly and said, Don't you love money as much as your life? Here are 5 million spirit coins. Take them. Take them away, take them all away. Arbor's expression turned gloomy when he saw the soup spill out. At this moment, he saw Yang Fengyan throw a spirit coin card in front of him. He stretched out his hand and put the spirit coin card in his pocket. He stood up and punched Yang Fengyan's big face. The two maidservants were speechless. Why did it feel like this stoic-faced little lady didn't play by the rules? He felt that he had been insulted. He could have just treated Miss Biao, but why did he really put that spirit coin card in his pocket? He took someone else's money and punched them in the face without a second word. What kind of trick was this? Arbor wasn't satisfied with one punch. He directly flew up and grabbed Yang Fengyan's braid, flipping her and her stool to the ground. Chapter 4785. Ah! Young Fengyan rolled to the ground in pain. Her eyes had barely widened when Arbor stomped on her chest and crushed her forcefully. Ah! Young Fengyan felt like her sternum was about to be crushed by that savage fellow. Her back was embedded in the rectangular chair, and she felt excruciatingly painful everywhere. Ouch! 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 Xiao Mu trampled Yang Fengyan under her foot as she stared at her in confusion. Did this girl's head get smashed? Why did it feel like she was even more stupid than when she was on Seikong Planet? Her soul couldn't have been taken over by someone, right? Arbor was paranoid and had a belly full of conspiracy theories, as he carefully sized up the woman lying on her back on the ground. Upon closer inspection, he could still see the faint scar on her cheek, which was still half a color difference from the surrounding skin. Sir Jojo had already whipped her in Seacombe Planet's Chin estate, so why didn't she learn her lesson? This young Feng Yan was truly the classic example of forgetting the pain after the wound healed. She clearly knew Sir Jojo's temperament for insulting people, yet she still came to provoke him. If she had the ability to provoke Arbor, then so be it. The main issue was that she couldn't beat him in a fight, nor could she rebuke him. She always came in high spirits only to return in disappointment. Didn't she find it boring? Arbor, you let go, let go, let go. Ow. Young Feng Yan felt like her sternum was about to cave in from that stoic face. Her charming little face couldn't help but turn green, and her entire body trembled in anger. Xiao, Arbor, oh. You stepped on me. Arbor looked at her with an indescribable expression, and he exerted more strength in his foot. Young Feng Yan's breathing stopped, and she almost couldn't catch her breath and completely fainted. When fifth young Master Qin heard the news and came over, he saw this scene. Fifth young Master wordlessly rushed over and said weakly, Qiao, Miss Qiao, could you first let go of Miss Yang so we can talk? Arbor turned to glance at fifth young Master. She was the one who ran over to be beaten. Fifth young Master, why do I have nothing to say? Big Brother had brought people out to search for Long Xiangyun and had yet to return. Why did he have to deal with such a matter? Miss Qiao. Fifth young Master braced himself and said, Let's not, don't be agitated. Release Miss Yang first. If Miss Yang is in the wrong, then we'll make her apologize to you. When the little stoic heard the words, don't get agitated, she thought that was right and hastily retracted her foot, secretly vexed. She was now the mother of a child. She should be more mature and steady. How could she get angry with Yang Fengyan, this retard? It was simply too impulsive. Arbor glanced at the fifth young Master, coughed lightly and retracted his foot. All right, take her out. Don't show her to me before I leave the ship. She's very annoying to look at. Fifth young Master's mouth twitched. He nodded and turned to look at Yang Fengyan. Why aren't you helping Miss Yang up? The man's face was cold as he shouted at the two maids who were watching the show. The two maids hastily rushed forward and pulled up Yang Fengyan, who was moaning incessantly, from the ground. It would have been fine if she hadn't moved, but the moment she moved, Yang Fengyan felt like all the bones in her body were falling apart. She felt uncomfortable everywhere, and it hurt so much that her eyebrows twitched. Arbor! Yang Fengyan shrieked. Before she could start cursing, she heard fifth young Master interject indifferently, why aren't you helping Miss Yang back to her room to rest? Chapter 4786. The two servant girls looked at each other and hurriedly reached out to support Yang Fengyan, intending to drag her out. However, Yang Fengyan was unwilling. She struggled hard but failed to break free from the two servant girls' arms. She stared at fifth young Master with eyes full of grievance and hatred. Fifth brother, you have to stand up for me. Where's eldest cousin? I want to see eldest cousin. This Chow Mu is simply going too far. Look at how she slapped my face. Just now, she stepped on my chest as if she wanted to break my bones. Arbor looked at her in confusion. Before this woman could continue to complain, he couldn't help but interrupt, didn't you want me to step on you? This strange woman not only had a bad brain, but her memory was even worse. When did I say such a thing? Yang Fengyan's pretty face twisted in anger. Not only do you like to be rough and violent, you even lie through your teeth and accuse me wrongly. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. Just now, you were lying on the ground and kept saying, step on me, step on me, step on me, to me. You're not old, but your memory is already bad. Indeed, you're getting more and more stupid as you age. Fifth young master's lips twitched, and he continued to be speechless. Young Feng Yan, who was supported by the two servant girls, was so angry that she looked like she was about to fall to the ground and vomit blood. She found that talking to Arbor was simply too infuriating. She wanted to turn into a wisp of smoke and fly into the sky. Did I ask you to step on me? I was just asking a question, all right. I mean, you dare to step on me. When Arbor heard this, he looked at young Feng Yan with an increasingly strange gaze. What a load of nonsense. I've already stepped on you, and you're still asking me if I dare. If it weren't for her baby, she would have given him another kick to prove whether she dared or not. Calm down, calm down. She was the mother of the baby. She couldn't be so impulsive in the future. She had to think about the baby. Yes, think about it more. She was someone with a baby. Arbor took 2 deep breaths to calm himself down. He stretched out his hand and spread his fingers. His face was expressionless as he said, forget it. I don't want to argue with you. Besides, you're just a patient. I can't be too calculative with you. Young Feng Yan was so angry that her face contorted several times. Her intuition told her that if she questioned the little stoic about her illness, she would definitely receive a very irritating answer. Arbor turned to look at fifth young master and shouted without hesitation, hurry up and take her back. I don't want to see her in front of me for the next few days. Young Feng Yan turned around and called out pitifully, fifth brother. 2 drops of tears rolled down his cheeks. Fifth brother, you just watched as I was humiliated like this. Young Feng Yan said with an aggrieved expression, I want to find eldest cousin and ask him to give me justice. Fifth young Sir Qin's face darkened impatiently. Why are you so nosy? If you're waiting for eldest brother, then wait on the deck. What did you come here for? She clearly knew that this stoic wasn't someone to be trifled with, yet she still insisted on coming here to humiliate herself. If this wasn't stupidity, then what was? Young Feng Yan stomped her foot hatefully. She pointed at Arbor and shrieked, she stole my 5 million spirit coin card. Arbor shook his head. I didn't steal it. Then, with a serious face, he continued, you're the one who delivered yourself to me. Chapter 4788. It's just that you're pregnant now, so it's inconvenient for you to move around. If possible, why don't you recuperate for a while? When you're healthy, you can go wherever you want. We definitely won't stop you. Upon hearing this, Xiaomu raised her elegant brows. You know. Eldest Qin smiled helplessly. I found several physicians to check on your condition. How could I not know? Seeing that he answered fairly sincerely, Xiaomu nodded her small head. She pretended to be nonchalant and asked, did you leak the news to Qin Xian that I'm here? Eldest young Sir Qin shook his head. I didn't say anything. For some reason, Arbor actually heaved a sigh of relief. She really didn't want to see Omega Kotoku in this unfavorable situation. Even if she did, she would feel like she had nothing to say. She was even more unwilling to be entangled with this person. Everything could wait until her divine perception recovered. She would bide her time for now. He spread out his divine perception on Zwolon Mountain and returned empty-handed after a round. He turned to shake his head at Mo Lien and Ma Shichin. In my humble opinion, you two must be overthinking. It wasn't like he hadn't stayed in the abyss of the sacrificial sea before. How many years had he stayed in this place? How could he not know if there was anything strange in the abyss of the sacrificial sea? The two youngsters were overthinking because it was their first time in the abyss of the sacrificial sea and they were unaccustomed and fearful. Once they were used to it, they could stay anywhere they wanted. Mo Lien glanced at the human snake. After a moment of silence, she suddenly asked, "Since you were able to escape the abyss of the sacrificial sea once, can you do it a second and third time?" "You're thinking too much." The human snake said expressionlessly, "I was able to leave successfully last time because someone summoned me. Besides, the abyss of the sacrificial sea is a deep pressure. It's impossible for it to let people like us go. Once you fall into the abyss of the sacrificial sea, you can forget about walking out alive." The human snake's head drooped. To be honest, he already couldn't remember how many seasons he had stayed in this dark place where he couldn't even see his fingers. If he had to recall well, most of the time, he seemed to be hibernating. He didn't open his eyes much and couldn't sense the changes in the outside world. "We won't be able to crawl out," the snake man said dejectedly. This fellow had probably tried to climb up from here more than once, and each time, he had failed. Mo Lien and Yuan Shichen saw his gloomy expression and couldn't help but glance at him. "This path is blocked, but it doesn't mean that other paths are blocked as well." Mo Lien walked forward for a while, then suddenly stopped and asked, "Is there an underground water source nearby?" The snake man listened attentively, frowned, and thought for a moment. Then, he nodded and said, "Probably. Don't look at me like that. Even though I was imprisoned in the sacrificial sea abyss, as you can see, the underground abyss is well connected. At that time, I had no idea where I was being held." "Then how did you come out after you were summoned?" Mo Lien was keenly aware of this problem. The human snake man was stunned for a moment, then he said, "I thought I saw a light floating in front of me. It was like a guiding light, guiding me all the way." Mo Lien muttered to herself, "Was this really Long Qian's summoning?" Yuan Shichen frowned. "The sound of the water is getting louder. Let's go and take a look. Could it be that there's another gathering place deep underground?" Chapter 4789. The human snake from Mdizwalan was at the very front. He moved very quickly. Although he did not retract his tail and his body looked very large, he was very agile and made no sound when he swam. Mo Lien and Hu Shichin followed behind him. They walked for about 10 minutes in the pitch-black darkness. Suddenly, a very thin ray of light appeared in front of them. It was like a glimmer of light seeping through a crack in the stone wall. Hu Shichin and Mo Lien looked at each other and hurriedly quickened their pace. That human snake had already slithered ahead. He swam rapidly in front of them for a few minutes like an arrow released from a bow. He suddenly stopped. Mo Lien and Hu Shichin, who were following closely behind him, did not expect this guy to suddenly stop. They almost stepped on his tail. Hu Shichin slapped him in annoyance and growled in a low voice, "What are you doing?" The human snake hurriedly waved at them. "Come here quickly." For some reason, Hu Shichin felt that this stinky snake was a little funny. When this stinky snake went berserk, his combat strength was amazing. Who would have thought that after he returned to normal, he would be so stupid? The contrast between before and after was so great that Hu Shichin sometimes could not react. The two of them followed and floated behind the human snake to stand still. Looking forward from their angle, they happened to see a strange sight. There was a huge sinkhole in front of them. Dozens of men and women in strange clothes were worshipping the sinkhole devoutly. They kowtowed again and again, their heads hitting the ground. Every time they knocked their heads, there would be a dong-dong sound. It was obvious that they used a lot of force. The three of them looked at each other in shock. Mo Lien lowered her voice and said, "Didn't you say that you've lived here for hundreds of years? Have you never seen these people before?" The human snake looked confused. No. I haven't. I don't think I've been here before, and I've never seen such a huge sinkhole. Hu Shichen could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth. I suspect that this human snake did not fall to the bottom at the beginning. What do you mean? The human snake asked, puzzled. It's where you were imprisoned. It's probably above this place. Heichin rolled his eyes and pointed at the dark sky. They had fallen from the bottomless pit, so it was very likely that the snake man had not fallen to the bottom in the first place. Ever since he fell in, he had been suppressed by the mysterious force of nature at the bottom of the pit. Perhaps he was just a careless person. When he felt that he couldn't break free, he fell into hibernation. Hu Shichen felt that he was most likely a few steps closer to the truth. He silently looked up and exchanged a glance with Crown Prince Lien beside him. Mo Lien didn't want to talk to this stupid snake. One of the leaders of the group of people who were kneeling and performing the sacrificial ceremony suddenly looked in their direction vigilantly and scolded coldly, Who's there? Mo Lien and Yuan Shichen looked at each other and nodded. Then, they walked out of the darkness and appeared in front of the group of people. Everyone hurriedly stood up from the side of the sinkhole and guarded the side of the sinkhole. Pairs of eyes looked at them in bewilderment. The leader of the group walked out of the crowd with a hunched back and a walking stick. He only had one pitch-black eye. Just like that, he stared fixedly at Mo Lien and Yuan Shichen and sized them up. Then, he spoke in a ghostly and sinister voice, "Who are you?" His gaze landed on the human snake man, and his pupils constricted slightly. There was a small commotion in the crowd. Chapter 4790. Someone tries his best to restrain his trembling voice and screams, "It's the human snake, it's that human snake. Don't panic, don't panic." The old man once again lets out a cold and calm voice, pacifying the crowd. Don't forget, in this place, the higher your cultivation base, the more you will be suppressed. A vicious glint flashed across that elder's eyes, and he stared at Mo Lien and Gu Qin in amusement. Shouldn't everyone be very happy that 3 more slaves have come to our kingdom of sin? The group of people behind him is startled, then suddenly bursts into cheers. One of the older men says excitedly, "That's great, it came down, this human snake finally came down, it's no longer blocking the entrance to the top. As long as we kill it, won't we be able to get out?" Yes, 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 yes. Amori is right, let's kill this human snake. Yes, kill it, we can get out. Zuolanshan looks at Mo Lien and Heichin with a blank expression. Look at these people's excited expressions, how come I don't remember meeting them before? Heichin can't help but roll his eyes. It should be you who blocked their path after hibernation. He pauses, his gaze immediately turns to the sinkhole where everyone is kneeling. This sinkhole wouldn't be the entrance they fell from, right? Mo Lien shakes her head, impossible. Looking at this position, it doesn't feel like it. Moreover, if we would appear here after falling, then why would we fall up here? It took us 2 days to walk all the way up here. Heichin thinks about it and says with a puzzled expression, then why are they praying to this sinkhole? Just as they are talking, some scattered things emerge from the sinkhole. The sinkhole is filled with white fog, only a trace of light is floating inside. The trace of light that Mo Lien and the others saw from afar came from here. Ah, thank God for the gift. Thank God for the gift. These people kneel down and kowtow to the sinkhole. Each one of them is acting weird, they look like lunatics. Mo Lien was speechless. These people didn't care about the 3 of them. They dug out the broken things from the heavenly pit and bowed to the heavenly pit with pious faces. They cleaned up the things that came out of the sinkhole and cried out in surprise, "It's a big bag of beans. Heavens, this person actually has beans in his inner world." This is too awesome. Wow, clothes, several sets of clean clothes. Mine, this is mine, mine, alright, everyone, don't fight for it. The old man's eyes flashed, and he said coldly, let's pack up first and return to the Great Lord. Don't forget that all resources have to be handed over to the Great Lord before they are distributed. Everyone resentfully retracted their hands, and their gazes once again landed on Emolien, He-Chin, and the other two. One of them smiled wretchedly at the old man. These boys are quite good-looking. Shall we offer them to the High Lord as well? The old man nodded and was about to give the order to tie up Emolien and the other two. Then, he heard a clamor from behind the sinkhole. Everyone turned around and saw a few well-dressed guards with whiskers escorting a young man all the way over. What's going on? Chapter 4791. The High Lord has ordered us to push this unappreciative thing into the sinkhole to be dealt with. The old man in the lead suddenly revealed a troubled expression and hesitantly asked, Commander, has the High Lord really made up his mind? Previously, he had said that he wanted to bury this person alive, but when things came to a head, he couldn't bear to do it and hurriedly found someone to bring him back. Fortunately, they didn't really bury this ancestor alive at that time, or else they would have to be buried with him. The High Lord has said that he won't change his mind this time. One of the guards waved his hand impatiently and said angrily, You don't know what's good for you. The High Lord is so good to you, and you still dare to make excuses. Since the High Lord has completely lost interest in you, you have no value to exist anymore. It's better to extract all the things in his inner world. Okay. The elderly man looked at the young man who had his head lowered in puzzlement, as if he didn't know how this person had angered the High Lord to this extent. If the High Lord really wanted to kill him, no matter how much he admired and liked this person, he wouldn't be merciful to him. The elderly man shook his head helplessly and couldn't help but step forward to persuade him. Little brother, you've been in our territory for almost 3 months. Actually, if you're willing to give in and say a few soft words to our High Lord, this matter will probably be over just like that. The elderly man suddenly saw the young man raise his head and look in his direction. His gaze was cold and cheerless. Don't talk nonsense with him, just push him down. The leader of the guards shouted impatiently. The elderly man sighed helplessly and signaled to the surrounding onlookers with his eyes. Immediately, 2 burly men stepped forward, one on the left and one on the right. They grabbed the young man's arms and effortlessly dragged him to the sinkhole. The leader of the guards unconsciously glanced in the direction of Emolien and the others. His eyes lit up and instantly widened. Who are they? Reporting to the commander, the 3 of them are newcomers. The human snake in front is the one who has been blocking our exit and not letting us out. So it's him. The commander glanced at the snake man with joy. So, the exit passage is now open. The old man hurriedly nodded. Indeed. That's great. The guard leader nodded and smiled at the old man. Old Zhang, you did well this time. The 2 new men were even more handsome than the young man who was about to be thrown into the sinkhole. I'm sure the Great Lord will like it even more. After sending away a troublesome manservant and recruiting 2 more, the great feudal lord would definitely reward him handsomely if this matter was settled. On the other side, the young man was about to be pushed into the sinkhole. In the blink of an eye, Emolien took out a handful of shooting star powder and threw it towards the crowd. The meteor scattered, and countless sparks ignited the corners of everyone's clothes. Everyone screamed and hastily patted away the sparks on their bodies. The elderly man looked up and saw that the snake man and the 2 beautiful men had all disappeared. Not only that, even the young man who was about to be pushed into the sinkhole was nowhere to be seen. Hurry up and look for him. The elderly man's cold voice sounded again. In any case, they couldn't run out of the range of this underground passage. It was impossible for them to escape from here with their strength. Chapter 4792. Mo Lien threw a shooting star scatter while Hu Shichen went to grab the young man. The four of them quickly ran away, retracing their steps without looking back. Seeing that they did not chase after them, Mo Lien and Hu Shichen stopped and turned to look at the young man who was panting. He looked young and his cultivation level was not low. Why was he panting after just a few steps? The young man held onto the wall with one hand and shook his head at them. I can't run anymore. Seventh Yen, who had transformed into a small dragon and had been coiling around Mo Lien's wrist, suddenly transformed into a human and jumped in front of the young man. He scolded him coldly, "You're so young, but you're panting so hard after just a few steps. Don't focus too much on improving your cultivation level. While improving, your body's quality has to keep up." The young man looked at Seventh Yen speechlessly and laughed bitterly. This place is oppressed by the laws of nature. The higher one's cultivation level is, the greater the suppression. He suddenly paused and looked at Mo Lien and Hu Shichen in confusion. He could feel that these two people's cultivation levels were much higher than his. Why were their movements so agile, as if they were not suppressed? "You're not suppressed." "Yes." Hu Shichen complained bitterly. "It's so uncomfortable. It hurts everywhere. My bones are sore all over. Also, I feel like my body is heavy after just a few steps. I can't move my legs." Mo Lien glanced at him speechlessly, then looked at the young man who was panting. She asked, "You were originally at Mystique Venerable rank, right?" Being able to reach Mystique Venerable rank at such a young age meant that he was quite talented. This young man should be quite famous in the Jianghu. Mo Lien asked tentatively, "What's your name?" "I'm Shenwu." "Thank you for saving me just now." "Shenwu. You're from the Shen family manor in Sichuan, right?" "That's right." Shenwu nodded with a slightly excited expression. "This one is alone and has gone out to gain experience. I encountered a large waterspout in the Sea of Forgetfulness and was swept into the undercurrent at the bottom of the sea. Then, as if falling into a bottomless pit, I fell all the way here." Mo Lien and Yuan Shichen looked at each other. "You don't know where this is. I hope the two of you will be kind enough to inform us." "This is the River of Forgetfulness's sacrificial sea abyss." Mo Lien looked at him speechlessly. This Shenwu was really unlucky. He had only come out to train, but he had actually been swept all the way to the seabed abyss. Brother Shen, why were they worshipping at the side of the giant sinkhole just now? At this point, Shenwu's face turned slightly pale. "I only know that after they push a living person down, there's an extremely powerful nature deprivation force inside that will grind the living person to pieces and clear out all the items in their inner world." No wonder that person shouted, "A big bag of beans," in surprise just now. It turned out that these people had pushed some foreign cultivators into the sinkhole, deprived them of their inner worlds, and obtained other people's food and tools. What you mean is, those cultivators who unluckily fell into this place from the Sea of Forgetfulness, the stronger their cultivation. In the end, he was suppressed and weakened instead. "That's right." Shenwu nodded and panted as he said, "They call this place the Kingdom of Sin. The natives of this place have taken a group of cultivators with extremely strong cultivation from the outside as slaves." Mo Lien was speechless. Chapter 4794. The natives of the Kingdom of Sin would kill for a little water, a little bean. They became more and more violent, killing each other, until one day outsiders entered their territory. Shenwu sighed. At first, they were very afraid, but after probing, they found out that among the outsiders, there was a higher cultivation level. On the contrary, the higher the cultivation level, the more severely they were suppressed. Like me, after I came here, I couldn't even take a few steps without gasping for breath. On the contrary, the ordinary people who came here were all walking as if they were flying, their bodies were not suppressed at all. After they joined the kingdom of sin, they were also able to receive better treatment. This allowed them to find a new way to quickly gather resources. They captured these outsiders, those who could be used for hard work, and those who could not be used were thrown into the sinkhole to quickly gather resources. Wait. He-Chin said curiously, from what you're saying, what you mean is that the natives of the kingdom of sin are not affected by this power of suppression. No. Shenwu nodded with certainty. Today, there are about 50 natives. Most of them are above the deity realm, and are not suppressed at all. They belong to a special group in the kingdom of sin. Ma Shichen pondered and nodded, so, the outsiders with high cultivation were suppressed like dogs, while the natives were all in the god realm. No wonder these outsiders were all reduced to slaves. Aren't they just a bunch of lambs waiting to be slaughtered? Mo Lien said indifferently. There is nothing special about them. Just like the power of deprivation allowed by the natural law and the sinkhole, it is fair to everyone. Whoever is thrown in will also be deprived. The reason why the natives are so special must be that they have a secret. They can avoid being suppressed by the natural law here. Ma Shichen nodded repeatedly upon hearing this. Although Mo Lien, this guy, normally looked very loathsome, his analytical skills were still very reliable. This was most likely the truth, there was nothing special about it at all. It was the natives who had mastered the risk of avoiding the natural law's suppression, so they could do whatever they wanted here. Chen Wu looked doubtfully at Mo Lien and He-Chin. Your Excellencies, are you not being suppressed, or is it that the suppression is not complete? It should be the second situation you mentioned. Hu Shichen smiled bitterly. What about this senior holy beast? The snake man proudly raised his chin, thought for a moment, and said, I think it's okay. There is indeed a suppressive force, but it's not that strong. You should be the guardian beast placed at the exit of the sacrificial sea by the aristocratic families of the River of Forgetfulness. Chen Wu continued talking to himself, I've heard them mention you before. It's because you're guarding the exit of the sacrificial sea that the people of Sin Kingdom have no choice but to stay here and continue to suffer. Hu Shichen pursed his lips and patted Shen Wu's shoulder. You're thinking too much. He was banished here 100 years ago. Because he was too bored, he had been hibernating all this time. Even without him guarding the exit of the sacrificial sea abyss, they wouldn't be able to leave. Even the heavenly Tao might not be able to do anything about the natural absorption and suppression power of this place. It is innate and does not go against the laws of the heavenly Tao. Chapter 4795. Thinking of her and Mo Lien's situation, a trace of worry flashed across her eyes. She really shouldn't be gloating over others' misfortune. After all, they were both unlucky and couldn't leave the abyss of the sacrificial sea. A trace of anxiety flashed across Shen Wu's eyes. Are we going to stay like this for the rest of our lives? Of course it's impossible. Mo Lien replied icily as he walked forward. Shen Wu was taken aback. Your Excellency, are you going back to Sin City? If you don't have a foolproof plan, it's best that we don't go back first. There are about 200 citizens in Sin City. Other than the 50 over aboriginals, the remaining people are not to be trifled with. The slaves are currently working in the Karst cave. Their High Lord, GC, has a wild idea and wants to turn the karst cave into a sleeping chamber. Mo Lian stopped and turned to look at Shenwu. You stay here first. Your excellencies aren't familiar with Sin City. If you insist on going, I'll take you through a small path. It'll be more discreet. After all, I've escaped from Sin City 5 or 6 times. I'm quite familiar with the complicated corridors. Shenwu smiled bitterly and nodded at Mo Lian and the rest. Glancing at him, Yuan Shiqin deliberated and asked, I heard the guard's words just now. Did the Great Lord capture you and make you the commander-in-chief? Looks like this guy won't give in even if he dies. Shenwu's handsome face was slightly embarrassed. He hurriedly said, I'm already engaged. Of course, I can't betray my fiancé. Although we've never met. Our marriage was arranged by my family. No, but I thought, since we're engaged, then I'm her fiancé. I must be loyal to her. Mo Lian's eyes brightened. She went forward and patted Shenwu's shoulder, revealing an admiring expression. You're not bad. Shenwu was inexplicably admired by Prince Mo, although he did not understand where this sir's admiration came from. When he heard this sir say, I will take you out of here, to him, he inexplicably felt like he had found a powerful backer. His mood suddenly became a lot more cheerful, as if the promise of this distinguished person in front of him would definitely be fulfilled. Yuan Shiqin glanced at Prince Mo speechlessly. Then, he turned around and exchanged glances with Snake Man, who was still confused about the situation. Suolon Mountain, how is your current situation? About 50%, the Snake Man answered honestly. Yu Qin cursed inwardly, damn. This human snake was indeed cunning. No wonder when he bumped into him in the corridor earlier, he tried to curry favor with them and acted as if he wanted to befriend them. He also repeatedly stated that the reason why he fought with them before was because he had been poisoned with the berserk potion. It turned out that this fellow's strength had been suppressed by half. He recognized the reality at a glance and quickly pretended to be a glutton, acting obedient in front of them. He and Mo Lian should have been suppressed by 30% of their strength. If the two of them joined forces, they could definitely beat Snake Man to a pulp at that time. Damn, the two of them were so smart, but they were actually tricked by this old ghost. Snake Man secretly glanced at Yuan Shiqin. His old face was a bit awkward. Don't misunderstand. I'm not afraid of you, so I reconciled with you. This old man thinks that I don't have any deep hatred with you two juniors. Chapter 4796. The reason why we fought was all because of those scoundrels from Wangchuan Dragon Clan. We have the same goal now, which is to leave the abyss of the sacrificial sea. So, it's necessary to put aside our prejudices for now, isn't it? Like hell I'll believe you. Jichen rolled her eyes at him in exasperation. The snake person glanced at Mo Lian again and studied his expression. He discovered that this young man's expression was apathetic, and when his phoenix eyes swept over him, they were cold and desolate. For some reason, he felt a chill down his spine. From his experience, this young man did not seem like a good person who would repay evil with kindness. Let's go. Mo Lian spat out this word without even looking back as he led the way forward. The snake man was right about one thing. Now that they had the same goal, they should leave first. As for the debt between him and this stinky snake, he would settle it one day. Did he think that he could let it go just like that? Dream on. After all, this stinky snake was the reason why he and Hu Shiqin fell into the abyss of the sacrificial sea so miserably. The snake man felt a gust of cold wind above his head and his body trembled for no reason. Just as he was about to shift, he saw Hu Shiqin glancing at him coldly. Why why are you looking at me like that? What was wrong with these two young men? They gave off a sinister vibe when they looked at others. I just wanted to remind you that your current form is a little too much. Hu Shichen sneered. The snake man looked down at himself. He was now a snake with a human body and a snake tail. He was about 2.5 meters tall and felt comfortable looking down at Mo Lian and Hu Shichen. However, he knew that they were about to sneak into the city of Sin. This beast form would be very eye-catching and he might be targeted immediately. The snake man obediently transformed into a human. Hu Shichen turned around and his jaw almost dropped. You! Big brother, wear pants. Mo Lian was speechless. Fortunately, his wife was not here. Otherwise, he would have destroyed this serpent's body. The snake man, yeah, this old man has never transformed into a human in the past. This was the dignity of an almighty holy beast. Their beast form was their true glory. Humph. He looked a little embarrassed and tried to defend himself. It's all your fault. What change? Hurry up and lend me a pair of pants. Mo Lian, fortunately, Shenwu reacted quickly. He immediately took out a new set of clothes from his inner world and offered it to Senior Snake with both hands. The corner of Zhuolanshan's mouth twitched imperceptibly. He expressionlessly took the clothes and put them on. He coldly said, "You brat, this old man will remember you." Shenwu was speechless. It was clearly a sentence of gratitude, but why did it sound like revenge when Senior Lanshan said it? With Shenwu leading the way, the four of them quietly took a small path to the back door of Nifa's city. During this period, they did not encounter the old man and his group who had previously worshipped the sinkhole. Wait a moment, Mo Lian said in a low voice. Then, she took out 4 blue paper charms from her sleeve and distributed them to everyone. Ji Chen's eyes lit up. Snake Man and Qin Wu looked at him in confusion. What is this? Hu Shichen hurriedly opened the paper charms and said in a low voice, "Don't ask so much. Use it. It's good stuff." In just a few seconds, Snake Man and Qin Wu saw that Hu Shichen's appearance had changed drastically. He transformed from a handsome young man into an ordinary young man at the prime of his life. With such an average-looking face, he would definitely not attract anyone's attention in a crowd. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.